Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Sports Ballers podcast. I'm Evan Ash, joined as always by Corey Puffis and Eric Meyer. Today on the show, we're doing something a little different, but something that our longtime listeners will definitely be used to. This is our fantasy football preview. So, yeah, y'all excited?
Absolutely. Fantasy football is finally here. It's finally back.
Yeah, I had my first draft yesterday, and maybe it's because my team looks surprisingly really good that I'm getting a little excited.
Surprisingly, your team always looks good in this league.
No, not this, but
the work league. It
looks good in that league. Last year I didn't really like my team, and I won the title, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But
I will tell you that I don't really like your team. I don't like your running back situation at all.
I don't know why that's the case, but we'll get to that a little later, I guess. What's wrong with my running back situation? You sound like you're being a hater.
I think you got one good running back there.
Who are these running backs, Eric?
I got Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, and I've got David Montgomery in my flex.
I'm not super high on Alvin Kamara as like my, I guess as an RB2 he's okay, but David Montgomery,
I don't see the problem.
I'm over him at this point.
I don't see the problem at all, and I picked up his backup, who I think could be somebody in short order.
We shall
see. Yeah, it sounds like you're being a hater.
We shall see.
Yeah, I agree. Corey, you are being a hater. I just think Eric got really good value late, to get a starting running back. But, the Bears are a complete disaster this season. So, you want players on teams that are good because they're going to score points and move the ball. The Bears are not one of those teams. So, I faded a lot of Bears guys just because I'm like, this team, they can't do nothing.
I made sure to pass on Allen Robinson when he came up, even though he's no longer with the Bears. I thoroughly don't believe in him at all anymore. So.
Oh, you don't?
Not at all.
Oh,
not
Corey.
I believe in Allen Robinson.
Yeah, you've been gassing on it for 6
You
years. How's that
believe in Allen
working out?
Now he for the first time in his career has a good quarterback throwing him the ball.
So it doesn't make him good.
Makes him better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, better than trash, which is still not good.
Matthew Stafford has shown that he can support multiple high-end wide receivers.
But he's not a high-end wide receiver. He's a mediocre receiver.
I disagree.
He's not Michael Crabtree.
I mean, Michael Crabtree was pretty mediocre, so it seems like he fits the bill.
I don't know. I guess since we're already getting into it,
Well, when you start the show hating, I'm gonna have to say something back.
Yeah.
I just had a draft, and Corey's acting like, "Oh, but your team wasn't that good." You know what happens when you talk smack too, so you better be careful.
I know.
You better watch your tongue.
That's why I didn't say anything last night, but here I am on the show, and I got to say something.
Yeah, you just have to say something. It'd be since again.
Kind of a boring show if a third of us just didn't say a word.
Well, but now you're being a hater. You could just not be a hater if you were less inclined to hate, but that's what you do. So here we are. Isn't it gonna be fun when we're calling a game? Maybe I will. I'll go pick him up off a waiver wire, even though he might be retired by this point. He's not on a roster, so he's available.
All right. So, Corey, how did you? We've got it set up a little differently. So like with our rankings, we've done like consensus overall rankings. So, how did you want to like describe, these numbers on the sheet?
So, tomorrow morning, really overnight, on our website, thesportsballers.com, we will have our consensus top 150 rankings. You can go to our blog, you can see the consensus rankings, and you can also see where each of us had them ranked within our own top 200 plus. I think each of us ranked at least 210 players for this exercise, and essentially when you're thinking about overall rankings, you're trying to think of, okay, if these running backs and these wide receivers are already off the board, are there any more that I would want to take before I would go and take a quarterback or a tight end? And if there aren't, then at that point you go ahead and put one of those guys in, right? Maybe Josh Allen is your number one quarterback. I think all of us had Josh Allen as our highest ranked quarterback for fantasy this year, right? But we all have him at a different place. There's a different place that each of us values him compared to those positions that have more scarcity, like running back and wide receiver. And we talk about scarcity not because, there are more wide receivers and running backs out there than quarterbacks. When we talk about positional scarcity, you have to keep in mind that you're going to start 5 of those position players. You're going to start 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers, or 2 wide receivers and 3 running backs. Or, in our league, we allow you to do 1 running back and 4 wide receivers if you so choose. But you're going to be starting a lot of those guys and only 1 quarterback. So you don't need to jump on a quarterback super early. And so when you go on there and you see, okay, where's Josh Allen for each of us, you might see one of us has him in the 30s or 40s. I think I had him like 66 overall. So when you're hearing these rankings, we are going to be looking less at saying that a player is like our number 89 overall player. Does that really mean a whole lot? Not really. What's important is looking at where we have him ranked compared to his ADP, his average draft position. And so that's going to be the bulk of our show today, I think, is talking about, okay, at where this player is currently being drafted, do I think I'm getting a really good value? Do I rank him higher than that? And so if he falls to that point and I get him, then that's a great value. Or do I have him ranked significantly lower? And so now that would be a huge reach. Even though that's where most people seem to be drafting him, I don't like him there because I think that there's other players who would be more valuable that I can get in that spot. That's really what those numbers are going to mean today.
Corey, you mentioned something that I want to drive home about, drafting a quarterback. It's not that, say you have Josh Allen ranked as your number 1 quarterback, and from watching football that the quarterback's the most important position on the field. Fantasy football is not reality football. This game is totally made up and sort of ridiculous in that regard. So like if you draft your quarterback first, it's not only are you getting, you're getting a good player in Josh Allen in this example.
Absolutely.
But the part that doesn't get talked about enough is that you're missing out on somebody else who won't be there when you pick again, but a Josh Allen probably would.
And let's say that somebody else, you're thinking, I really want to have Josh on my team. Should I take him here? And you decide, well, I'm pretty close to the turn. I'm going to have my next pick in 4 or 6 picks from now. So I'm going to go and grab a different position player and hope that he falls to my next pick. And then somebody during that round turn takes him. The drop-off from Josh Allen to the next quarterback is not going to be nearly as significant as the drop-offs that you're going to see between the running back 1 and the running back 12, or the running back 13 and the running back 18 even, right? Those drop-offs are going to start to get really steep at the running back and wide receiver positions. And, at the quarterback position, I have Jalen Hurts ranked way below Josh Allen, of course, but on a points per game basis, how much of a difference is there going to be? There will be a difference, absolutely, and that will add up over the course of the season. But on a per game basis, that drop-off is not going to be as bad as missing out on a top wide receiver or a top running back.
Okay, Eric, what do you what type of draft strategy do you typically employ?
I mean, I'm a believer in, for the first 2 rounds at the very least, you get the best available guy, right? Like if it's so typically it's going to be at least one running back. Now, there could be some strange circumstances based off of the way your draft is going, your position on the board, where you might end up doing the legendary 0 RB draft. But
Oh, jeez.
if I was ever in a situation where I ended up doing a 0 RB draft, I would be really upset that I was in that situation. Like, if I felt so compelled to do it, I'd be like, okay, you forced me to do this. That tells me I'm going to have a rocky draft, in my opinion. Like, it's really hard to make up value at the running back position later in the draft. Wide receivers, you can do that all the time. Like, there are plenty of good wide receivers available, plenty of dudes that are ready to pop, plenty of guys that maybe have a better rapport than people realized with the quarterback, and so they initially were a 2 or a 3, and they move up into becoming a 1, right? We've seen that happen, whereas a running back is pretty much a structured, this guy is assigned this role, and unless he gets hurt or he just absolutely sucks, he's not going to lose that position. So that's where you really got to go with it, in my opinion, is to try to get at least one running back. If you can't, make the best with what you can. But still, first 2 picks, you don't have to pick 2 running backs, but try to get one and then best available after that. If it's a tight end, that's okay. Like if it's a Mark Andrews or a Travis Kelce, and that's, in your opinion, the best available, don't shy away from drafting a tight end in that situation. But you ought to think running back, receiver primarily. The tight end situation is 1 or 2 exceptions in the first 2 rounds, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's always tough, when you have that situation where you get to your pick in the first 2 rounds and the best available player is a tight end, because whether it's Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, you're losing out on a pretty important position. You're either, you've either gone wide receiver, tight end, which I think is really rough to bounce back from, or you're going running back, tight end, which is not as bad, but then you're really missing out on some of the top tier wide receivers. And while wide receiver is a much easier position to find on the waiver wire, you're much more likely to find a wide receiver deeper in the draft who's going to hit than you are a running back deeper in the draft. It just feels bad week by week, because then you're kind of playing a guessing game of which of my wide receivers is going to hit, and it feels like you always end up being wrong. The guy on your bench goes for 20, and the guys in your starting lineup each go for 5, and you're just sitting there pounding your head into the table like, why did I do that? So like Eric said, if you're in that situation, the best guy available is Mark Andrews or it's Travis Kelce, right? It's one of those top, like really top flight tight ends. Go for it. I feel like I listen to the sports I don't listen to the Sports Ballers podcast because I'm on the Sports Ballers podcast.
Maybe you should run it back.
I listen to the Fantasy Footballers podcast sometimes, and I was listening to the show on tight ends from a couple of weeks ago, and Andy Holloway brought up a really interesting point that I kind of agree with, which is I'd rather try and trade for one of those top tight ends. I did that last year. I traded for Kelce. You do that because with tight.
That was 2 years
ago. Or was it 2 years ago?
Yeah,
it was 2 years ago. Last year, I think I traded for Mahomes.
Well, you traded and you traded Mark Andrews for Travis Kelce, which didn't feel like a big gain.
Which wasn't really that big of a gain.
He gave up like a 3rd-round pick.
It was a little bit at the time. Last year would not have been a gain because
Mark Andrews was the number 1 tight end. Yeah,
tight end last year. But in any case, I would consider trading for one of those guys if I know that they're doing well and I have a piece that I could trade for him, and I feel like, okay, I've got a wide receiver that's really good. It's a pretty equal value. Somebody else who has that tight end needs a wide receiver because they went running back, tight end in the first 2 rounds, and so they're kind of hurting at the wide receiver position. Maybe I try and make that trade knowing that I can still find those wide receivers on the waiver wire or, from players that I drafted deeper in the draft. I might try to do that and see if I can get one of those guys after I know that they've hit, because there's nothing worse than picking one of those top tight ends and then they don't actually pan out and be as good as expected. Like last year, Travis Kelce was still good last year. You still started him every week and were mostly happy with him. But he did have some pretty disappointing weeks that we weren't really used to seeing from him. Like, he's usually every single week he's a top 10 if not top 5 tight end. And last year we saw some weeks where he fell outside the top 15.
Yeah, and the thing with the tight end is you have to understand that passing on a tight end means that you only have, like, every draft pick comes with an opportunity cost, right? And you have to fill 2 receiver spots. Most leagues require 2 running back slots and then a flex, which typically a flex spot you don't want to fill with a tight end because just they're generally less productive than wide receivers and running backs. And so for each pick you make, every time you pass on a tight end, it's only costing you opportunity in one spot, the tight end spot. Whereas if you pass on a running back and you don't have one on the roster yet, or you pass on a wide receiver and you don't have one on the roster yet, that's costing you your wide receiver 1 slot, your wide receiver 2 slot, and perhaps even your flex slot, because each one of those spots gets worse because you chose to pick in the second round a tight end. So I'm not saying don't do it, but it's high risk, high reward, right? Like, if you've got a tight end that is distinguishably better, right? Like, he scores 15 points a week and the average tight end scores 6. That's a huge boon for you. But if he gets hurt, which tight ends get hurt a lot because they're physical players. They get tackled by linebackers and safeties. They're expected to block a lot. They sometimes don't last the whole year. If you lose that tight end and you use the first couple of round pick on them, then you might really see your season go sideways really quickly. So there is definitely a risk with doing it. But if you can hit on a wide receiver a little bit later and still maintain that I've got the best tight end in the league status, that's just going to add to your ceiling.
We moved our league off of ESPN a few years ago, rather. But ESPN is still one of the biggest fantasy platforms in terms of the number of users.
I imagine it's the biggest.
It probably still is the biggest. The only one I could think might be close would be Yahoo, but I think ESPN is still the biggest one by user base. And so a lot of times when you look at data that's been gathered from previous fantasy seasons, it's coming from ESPN, and based on ESPN data from last year, I think it was just from last year. As far as teams that made it to the championship, if you were one of the first 2 teams to pick a tight end in your league, you generally had a pretty good shot at making the championship because the top 2 tight ends are usually pretty predictable, right? Like this year, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce are most likely going to be, if not the top 2 tight ends, they're both going to be in the top 4 or 5 for sure. After that, the next best chance to make it to the championship in your league is if you were like the 10th or 11th team to take a tight end. So you really don't want to be one of those middle guys taking a tight end because A, you're probably taking that guy earlier than where his value really is, and B, you're less likely to get the right guy. Dawson Knox last year had a great season. He was usually outside the top 10 tight ends taken in drafts. Dalton Schultz had a really good season until he got hurt. He was outside the top 10 tight ends taken. In fact, he was undrafted in a lot of ESPN leagues last year. So you can find tight ends who are surprises, and you got to jump on those guys. But if you don't get one of the top 2 guys, at that point you really do need to shift your focus away from tight end to filling out those running back, wide receiver, and even quarterback spots, and worry about getting that tight end later on. Because the chances of actually getting a really good tight end in those middle picks is pretty low historically.
Yeah, typically if you don't get one of the top tier guys, you're better off filling out your team, even some of your bench pieces, and maybe getting somebody, because you can still get a starting tight end, like somebody that's in that middle tier in like the 8th or 9th round.
Take David Njoku this year. The fantasy footballers are really high on him. I'm still kind of on the fence about him right now because we've been talking about his athleticism for years and it's never really panned out. But
athleticism. He's in the NFL. Everybody's athletic. That's the job.
But they're all really high on him. So let's say that you're thinking, okay, well, I also really am high on him. I know that Jacoby Brissett, just targets the tight end like crazy, and so he's going to be the starting quarterback, supposedly until Deshaun Watson returns in week 12 or week 13 or whenever that's going to be, and so I'm really confident that he's going to be good. I want to go get him in the middle rounds. Most likely, he's going to last until pretty deep in your draft. you don't need to reach on him because, sure, you got him and maybe he hits, but you could have gotten him a round later, 2 rounds later, 3 rounds later maybe. And in the meantime, you have, as Eric said, you've cut down how good your wide receiver 2 or your flex or your second flex, depending on your league structure, is, right? You may have lost out on a really good running back on your bench that can step in during bye weeks or if a guy gets hurt, right? You're missing out on talent that you didn't have to miss out on while still getting David Njoku if that's the guy that you really want at tight end. So these are some of the things that you have to take into consideration when you're drafting. It's not just taking the guy that you like the best. It's also thinking about, okay, where do most people value him, and can I wait to get this guy?
You should also consider your league mates, right? Like if you're in a league that's full of guys who are all fans of one team, then players on that team might get drafted a little higher than maybe they would otherwise. Question for you, Corey. Why did the fantasy footballers think so highly of David Njoku? Just because Brissett throws a tight end so much?
That seems to be like their primary argument is that, but also because he got a pretty big deal this offseason. I think he's like the 4th highest paid tight end right now.
He got a nice extension
by AAV.
Yeah. The issue that I have though with looking at stuff like how often a quarterback throws to a tight end or whatever is ultimately what decides production is the same thing that decides production in real football is, are you actually good at football? And so there are a lot of times where players will get target shares and they'll get looks from the quarterback, and if they mess them up, they lose those opportunities.
Yeah.
They get written out of the playbook. They might even lose their starting job. The quarterback looks elsewhere on those plays. The team says, oh, well, we can't throw the ball because our highly priced tight end has stone hands, so we're going to have to just run even more. Like, it affects everything when the player himself isn't actually performing. And those opportunities go away mighty quickly if you don't perform. And the question is, do you trust David Njoku to perform? Historically speaking, I wouldn't, right? Yeah. Like, I just don't know if he's going to maintain. Like, all that stuff sounds great, but he has to make it work. Yeah. And if he doesn't, he's going to lose those chances, and you're going to get stuck with a really bad asset.
In a similar vein, they're also really high on Austin Hooper, and this is a guy who had one really big year for Atlanta, where he was a late round, if not undrafted, fantasy player who wound up having a great season with Matt Ryan at the quarterback. Got to Cleveland, we all think, okay, like this is his opportunity to be, a top target, and did squat with it.
Yeah, David Njoku was the guy that got more targets.
Right, David Njoku wound up getting more targets. Now Hooper is with Tennessee, who just lost, A.J. Brown. They lost a lot of targets for their offense. And it is it's still a pretty good offense overall. But he's, you figure would be a pretty featured role, a player in that role at tight end for the Titans. And so they're kind of high on him there. Again, I don't really know how I feel about him because the last few years, I haven't seen anything from him that suggests that this is a guy who's actually going to take that opportunity and run with it. So yeah, he's going to have the opportunity early in the year. But do you really want to risk taking him in the 6th, 7th, 8th round of your draft?
Austin Hooper?
I think that he's a 10th round player at best.
Yeah.
I have him as my 25th tight end.
that might be a little low, Evan. That might be a little
behind Brevin Jordan. But I don't even know who that is. Who's that guy?
You don't know who he is, but you know he's better than Austin Hooper. So there you go.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the Titans offense turned into a pumpkin. We all saw it.
Thank you, Dr. Rick. Yes.
Yeah. So you mean to tell me that the Titans are going to be able to throw the ball to anybody? I mean, A.J. Brown was a beast. He gone. So they're stuck.
And they got to throw sometimes to somebody, and they're not going to be throwing to Derrick Henry.
Right, but that's the point. You got to throw sometimes to somebody. It's not a ringing endorsement for anybody in fantasy football, especially if you're going to pick them earlier than maybe most would. You better be sure that it's not just, we got nothing else to do, so we might as well see what happens here. That's the crap you do on a bye week in your flex spot. You're like, I need somebody to just fill this spot because all my dudes are down and I can't fill this flex spot. So you throw somebody in there that's like, body. Well, he's going to get something. Well, yeah, that's why it's a flex. You don't draft a tight end, like I said, over potential weekly starters that you would in the 6th round. Because, I mean, at that point, you're still drafting starting players. So don't draft a bum. Don't draft somebody that you're worried might be a bum. Go with somebody that's reliable. And a tight end that's playing in a brand new offense that has historically not lived up to the hype, that ain't it.
All right. So if you don't take away anything from this show, just remember, don't draft a bum.
That's really that's fantasy football in a nutshell. Don't draft.
That should be your goal every round.
Don't draft bad players. Then you'll do. You'll do okay.
Also, don't get
reality
overexcited
football
week
too.
1 by one guy who was not drafted and all of a sudden goes off.
Jared Cook.
Or what's his name? The wide receiver for the Cowboys a few years back. He
Ah,
had like 3
boy.
touchdown catches.
I can't remember. Who
It wasn't Galloway.
No.
I can't remember his name.
Yeah, that.
I'm trying to think of, what about Larry Donnell?
Larry Donnell. Oh my
Hey,
goodness.
Larry Donnell picked me up a nice win over Corey with
He
the
did.
last-second
I still have
touchdown.
nightmares
Corey
about that
Corey can't forget that one because that was a barn burner of a fantasy game. And
y'all were still rooting for the team at the time, and it was against the team.
It sure was.
No, that game was the 3 touchdown game was, but the game that Corey and I were watching was a Monday night game with the Giants versus the Colts.
yeah.
And Corey had Andrew Luck, who was going off that year, and I had Larry Donnell, who was doing squat. And I'm just like, come on, dude, just give me a couple of catches to keep me edged out over Andrew Luck. He wasn't doing it. And then Eli slings him a touchdown in the back of the end zone in garbage time, and that pushed me over the edge. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was a great catch, too. He made a really good play. And then he did nothing for the rest of his
career.
career.
By less than a point in that game.
Yeah, it was inside a point. It was great.
Hated that.
I needed that win a lot more than you did, so I didn't feel bad. Your team was rolling, and I was recovering from an 0-2 start to get myself into playoff position, so no complaints there.
Okay. I mean, unless y'all have any bigger ideas you want to add, I'm gonna go ahead and jump. What was it?
I've looked up I take that for data, Corey. You were mocking my team for having Alvin Kamara, who I picked with the 15th pick in my draft, by the way, and you ranked him 9th on your list. So I'm not understanding.
Oh, snap.
I went to the tape with you.
I guess I just didn't. I don't know.
Maybe
I'm a little. Maybe I
spraying some haterade over here.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, you should be knocking me for picking Mixon 6th when you have him ranked 7th. But it's also a standard league, so things get shuffled a little bit. But
standard leagues definitely get shuffled, and I mean that's part of the issue is like you don't get any PPR from Alvin Kamara.
Okay, but he's still a running back, so I mean it's still better than the penalty that receivers get in standard leagues. So
sure.
So yeah, I stand by my pick that it was a fine pick. I don't, and Corey's ranking backs that up. In fact, your boy here had him ranked 15th. And picked him 15th, so just saying.
Oh, okay. Where did I didn't even remember where I ranked Alvin Kamara.
You've got him ranked 7th, Evan.
7?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you should have picked Alvin Kamara.
And I did. We all agree, according to these numbers. The eye in the sky don't lie.
Yeah, men lie, women lie, numbers don't, Corey. It's incontrovertible. It's on the sheet. So, sticking with you, Corey, you typed this in and you put your name first. Apparently, there's some people who you have described as draft steals. Christian Kirk, let's start with the first one. Why are you so high on him? Particularly, why are you so much higher on him than Eric and myself?
Yeah, I mean,
he's on the Jaguars now.
Yes, so Christian Kirk is with the Jaguars. Eric has him ranked 6 spots ahead of his ADP. Evan, you have him ranked 16 spots ahead of his ADP. So we all like him more than the average person does right now. But I've got him 44 spots up. His ADP right now is 103. I've got him ranked as my number 59 player. And really it is just the opportunity. I mean, Christian Kirk has shown in the past that he can be a really good wide receiver. The last year in Arizona was kind of a weird year for that offense. I mean, every year seems to be a weird year, especially in the second half of the season for that offense because they start out hot and then they just kind of fall apart. But last year was just a very packed group in that wide receiver room. mean, there were 4 guys who were all jockeying for targets, and I think that really cut into Christian Kirk's opportunity. In Jacksonville, he's pretty much going to be the guy. Like, who else do they have on their roster at wide receiver? DJ Chark is gone. And, I mean, Chark wasn't that great, but he was a serviceable wide receiver for them. Like, Christian Kirk is probably going to be the number 1 target for Trevor Lawrence, who I think is going to improve in year 2. You know, over the course of the last 4 games of the season last year, he started to show some inklings of improvement. I think a full offseason of work with the team is going to help with Trevor Lawrence, and I think that will translate to Christian Kirk. So yeah, I like him as a guy. You know, if I don't know that I would necessarily take him at 59. That's where I have him ranked, only because I think that I could get him a little bit later, right? So like I might get to that point and say, well, most people don't seem to like him that much, so I'm going to hope that he sticks around for another round or two. But I would absolutely take him ahead of that 103 ADP right now.
So, if I'm doing the math correctly, in a 12-team league, that means that you would have Christian Kirk as a late 5th-round pick.
Yeah.
So, a late 5th-round pick is usually somebody that you would be looking to pick up as a second wide receiver.
Yeah, usually second wide receiver, maybe flex at the worst. But yeah, like I would look at him as a pretty good wide receiver too.
Yeah, see
middle back end wide receiver too.
That's my hang up with this is I feel like he's more of a, you know, he's a fill-in guy for bye weeks. I don't really see him as a every week starter. I don't think he's earned that. And this is another situation where, again, I know the opportunity is going to be there, but at the same time, what's the upside with the Jaguars' offense? It's still bad. I realize Trevor Lawrence will be better, but the offensive line's still not going to be great. Now, Doug Peterson's obviously a much better coach than Urban Meyer. That's a big-time upgrade there. But I question whether or not Kirk can maintain his status as the guy, because we've seen with young quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, like Baker Mayfield in recent history, you get a highly paid wide receiver to come in, but that doesn't necessarily happen to be the guy that the quarterback clicks with. And Christian Kirk isn't necessarily talented enough, in my opinion, to just click with anybody. So I have concerns that status as the number 1 target getter for Jacksonville might not stick. And even if it does, how productive can he be with those targets? He seems like a guy who flashes, you know, some upside, but he's always been kind of inconsistent to me, and that would scare me off of him picking him that early.
Well, let me tell you some wide receivers who are ranked ahead of him on our consensus ADP, not because I have them ranked higher, but mostly because you guys have them ranked higher. Amari Cooper. I would definitely rather have Christian Kirk than Amari Cooper at this point. Elijah Moore, I'd rather have Christian Kirk. Michael Thomas, we have no idea what's going on with his injury situation. We haven't seen him on the field for 2 years. I'd probably take Christian Kirk over him. I would take Christian Kirk over Juju Smith-Schuster. I'd take him over Marquise Brown. I'd take him over Darnell Mooney. Like, there's a number of wide receivers that are ahead of him on our consensus rankings that I would, without even thinking twice about it, take Christian Kirk over.
I mean, obviously my rankings are my rankings, so I wouldn't take him over any of those guys because I have them ranked lower.
I wouldn't either.
But you know, I could make arguments for each of those guys ahead of him, in my opinion. But I mean, who knows? I'm based off of what I'm seeing here, there's a pretty damn good chance you're gonna be drafting Christian Kirk in our league because I don't see that level of upside. But you know, it's fantasy football.
I mean, if I get him as a wide receiver 2, I'll be okay with that. If I get him as a flex, I'm gonna be thrilled.
Okay.
I wouldn't be comfortable with Christian Kirk as my wide receiver 2. I would be.
I mean, I would rather have a couple of better players as my wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. That would be fantastic. But if he's my wide receiver 2, I'm not sweating that.
Yeah, and so another thing here is, like, obviously if you have your stance that he's capable of being a wide receiver 2 and you trust him in that spot, then you're gonna rank him higher, and that's totally fair. But for me, since I don't see him having that level of trust, I'm now looking at, okay, boomer bust, sleeper type picks, and those other guys you mentioned, I think have more upside than Christian Kirk does. I just don't see him being this big play guy, this touchdown getter, like you could potentially see with some of these other guys that we talked about. So I'm going to have him a little bit lower than that in the sort of mid-round section where you're looking for depth and you're looking for, you know, guys that could potentially win your league. And Christian Kirk is not as high on that list as far as I'm concerned. So that's probably why I have him sort of where the consensus has him a little bit higher. But, just my view on him is he's not good enough to be a starter, and he doesn't have the same upside to Chase as a sleeper. So he goes 10th round, maybe 9th round, something like that. He would definitely be the first guy off the bench, maybe to fill in for a bye week or if somebody gets hurt, and I would be fine with him in that role. But beyond that, I'm not quite sold on him.
Okay.
All right. A little tidbit that our listeners may not have known. Did y'all know that Corey is short for Cordarrelle? So, Corey, your namesake, Cordarrelle Patterson.
According to Brian Bencadra, my name is short for Cornelius.
Oh, okay. Well, it's on this podcast, you're Cordarrelle. And your boy, Cordarrelle Patterson, you're 36 spots above ADP in your rankings of Cordarrelle Patterson. I'm only 5, and I had him on my team last year, and I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? This guy isn't that good and keeps performing every week. So what makes you such a believer?
Yeah, and Eric does not like Cordarrelle Patterson at all. He's got him ranked 5 spots below his ADP right now. Mm-hmm. This is another one that's really opportunity. Who else? There's no other good running back on the roster in Atlanta. He's going to have to be the running back one, and he can catch the ball. He showed us last year that he was utilized in that wide receiver in not really a wide receiver role so much, but as a receiving back out of the backfield quite a bit. My ranking with him being 45 maybe is a little bit higher than, but I don't know how many other running backs I would really want to have ahead of him that are in that range. So to give an idea of some guys that I have, behind Cordarrelle Patterson, I didn't do positional rankings, so I'm having to kind of look through my chart a little bit differently, and I don't know if I can do that without messing up the view for you guys. So I'm not really trying to do all that. But
I have him as RB27.
You have him as RB27. Yeah, like I said,
yeah.
I don't have those rankings in front of me. I'd have to try and cherry rig those or something, but. In any case, I definitely think that the opportunity is there for him. That offense is going to be terrible this year.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody has to get some fantasy points, and the only 2 players I can think of who are going to do anything are him and Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. I will say, though, my argument against somebody has to get the yards and the points, not necessarily. Right? I drafted Le'Veon Bell his first year with the Jets, and it was one of the worst football watching experiences of my entire life. Watching the Jets and watching them give the ball to Le'Veon Bell, and he might get 2 yards, maybe. He's wide open for a little dump off, and whatever terrible quarterback they had that particular game just throws it right to the other team instead. They were always behind, so they're never in, a game situation where they would be running the ball slightly more often than they would in a neutral situation. So it was just a mess. When picking somebody from a bad team, just buyer beware, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess to counter that, again, we've already this is maybe going to be a theme of this episode, is the idea that somebody's got to get the touches, is treacherous at times. This table's moving a little bit.
Moves.
Okay, we got a wobbler. So anyway, Cordarrelle Patterson, to me, he had a good year last year. There's no doubt about it. But the idea of somebody's got to get the touches, and here's somebody that's coming off of a good year. Now, granted, this is a little bit of a different circumstance. Everybody remember, I believe his name was Mike Davis, running back that backed up Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, he's gone.
And
Patterson took over him.
Yes, and Mike Davis was signed by the Falcons, and everybody said, "Oh, Mike Davis, he was pretty productive for the Carolina Panthers last year." And somebody's got to get the carries there because Todd Gurley's washed up and all this, that, and the other. And well, Mike Davis was terrible. And some bum named Cordarrelle Patterson came along and took his job, even though Cordarrelle Patterson is not a running back by trade. And so the idea that it's going to go even better this year for Cordarrelle Patterson, I don't see it. I feel like the Falcons are going to tank this year. They're going to be awful. They're starting an absolute joke of a quarterback. No shade to Marcus Mariota, but, he's not good. Like, he lost his job to Ryan Tannehill, who, has legitimately been pretty good, but not special.
He took his germ.
Yeah, exactly. And he pops up here in Atlanta. I mean, I feel like we can't understate the fact that Matt Ryan, despite the fact that he's no longer in his prime, he knew how to take advantage of the few good players he had. Mariota doesn't do that. And yes, I'm going to keep calling him that because that's what Roger Goodell called him on draft day.
That's hilarious.
And it was
the
great.
second overall pick.
Yeah, like the Heisman winner, right? Like the guy that won the Heisman the previous year and was playing in the college football final or playoff championship game against Ohio State.
Learn how to pronounce his name.
He butchered his name. That's just unbelievable. But anyway, Mariota's not great. I don't think he's going to be a guy that can be relied upon. And maybe it's because I've got Tyler Algier as a sleeper, a rookie running back from BYU on the Falcons. He's 22 years old. He's gotten some action. He's probably not going to start initially, but that's somebody to watch out for as a guy of Cordarrelle Patterson, who's 31, and if he starts trying to become a bell cow at 31 as a wide receiver converted to running back, I don't trust him that highly. I think he's a flex option. I don't see him as, I feel like your first 4 picks are the bedrock of your team, and I don't know if I trust him to be that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got him +5, not feeling it. Somebody else who I'm not feeling is Chase Edmonds, who, Corey, you're 32 spots above ADP on him.
Oh, I am definitely big on Chase Edmonds this year. I think that he's a pretty good running back, and Miami paid him like a really good running back. Buffalo wanted him. Houston offered him a crap ton of money. They offered him the biggest contract out of all the teams that went after him, and he said no. He was the first running back signed in free agency. Everybody wanted this guy. So clearly there is some talent there. And he chose to go to the Dolphins because he believes in their zone blocking scheme. He believes that he can run behind that. And I believe he can too. I think that he's being slept on big time. And honestly, like we put these rankings together on Saturday or Sunday and into Monday in preparation for this show. I have him hot, like on our list, I have him below Cordarrelle Patterson. I've moved him way up ahead of Cordarrelle Patterson at this point. He's
way up ahead of him.
Yeah, he's in my he's in my like late 30s, low 40s right now.
Ooh.
Overall.
Ooh. Overall.
Ooh.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I would love to get me some Chase Edmonds.
I mean, I clearly am on somewhat of the same page as you because I'm pretty high on him too. I'm 23 spots above ADP, so I don't feel compelled to split hairs for 9 spots. I think we're mostly feeling him, in the same way. I feel like he's playing with a team with a revamped offensive line that is designed to give Tua Tagovailoa a chance, right? Like we talked about this in other podcasts with Jalen Hurts, specifically how the Eagles went out and just completely stacked their roster in his favor. And if he can't get it done this year in year 3 with that team, then he's just never going to get it done. And that's sort of where Tua is too. But I feel like with Hurts, he's got a possibility of making it. Still not a huge believer in him. I'm more of a believer in Tua, especially when he's got the right system in place. But I also know that Chase Edmonds is more than just a running back. He's a capable pass catcher out of the backfield. And Tua's a guy that probably like to run play action, get on the move a little bit. And there are going to be opportunities to check it down to the running back. He's going to have opportunities behind that line, that smart run blocking scheme that Corey mentioned. I mean, Mike McDaniel is a disciple of Kyle Shanahan, and we've seen Kyle Shanahan turn complete nobodies into stud running backs. Raheem Mostert, ever heard of him? So, I figured that some of those principles will carry over to Miami, and Chase Edmonds is going to be a legit starting running back. I think he's going to be a guy that you're going to want to have in your lineup every week.
Yeah, so I now have Chase Edmonds. I was able to make a copy of the spreadsheet so that I can adjust it for myself without messing up how it looks for you guys. But I had Chase Evans as my RB24. He is now my RB18, ahead of David Montgomery and Breece Hall, and ahead of Travis Etienne, who is going to be my keeper in the 16th round.
Your boy.
Yes.
You were in love with Travis Etienne.
He is my 37th overall ranked player. I had him at number 54 over the weekend. So he has moved way up for me.
Okay. Well, I'm not even going to defend myself on this one. Like, me being minus 22, that's probably a little low. He's probably going to be better than, being the 112th overall player. I
believe that would be 108th.
Yeah.
Mr. Math guy.
Yeah. Can't do live math on the show.
And you
we roast Corey all the time for doing bad live math, so
You give me so much grief for not doing live math on the show. And here you are.
Okay. Well, anyway, I slammed this guy too hard. I just have doubts about the Dolphins. I'm feeling bad vibes about the Dolphins, but
I don't see any reason to have that bad of vibes. Yeah. Their defense is always competitive and keeps them in games, and their offense has only gotten better.
Yeah, I like the Dolphins this year. I like them.
Maybe.
I don't like them to necessarily beat the Bills.
No.
I like them to finish.
They're not going to beat the
Bills. The Bills are going to win the Super Bowl, so,
But, obviously I still have to do a little more research in depth for next week's show, and we actually preview the real football season.
The real stuff. The league.
But preliminarily, I like them to finish second in that division.
Preliminarily, that's a hell of an adverb right there.
Yeah, I used it correctly.
Yes, you did.
And I pronounced it correctly.
You didn't get mush mouth over that.
No,
that was pretty good. I like that.
Yeah. All right, Eric, Rashad Bateman.
Your boy.
Yeah. So I thought I was high on Rashad Bateman, and apparently not.
Well, Corey's higher on him.
Yeah, so I am higher on him, but
why is
he wasn't one of my three highest, and he was one of Eric's three highest, so I put him on there. I tried to spread things around a little bit.
I feel like I'm clearly the most in between here. Like I'm kind of the
You're right where I am. There's only 4 spots between us.
No, but I mean like in general, like I don't take big swings like you do with 44 or 36 or 32. My highest here is 18, so I think that kind of makes that point. But yeah, I'll talk about Rashad Bateman. This is a case of, we talk about opportunity, but Rashad Bateman's good, man. Like, I watched him last year when he finally got on the field, and he showed that he had all of the right stuff. I'll just, being an eye test guy, right? He looked like a guy that knew how to play the position. Yeah. And I feel like with the Ravens being healthier this year, Ronnie Stanley finally getting back on the field, the offensive line should be better. And, Lamar's going to be throwing the ball and running the ball and doing all the things that Lamar does because he's Lamar and he's great. But he's not just going to throw the ball to Mark Andrews. He's going to have to get the ball to somebody at the receiver position. And now that Marquise Brown's not there to drop all the passes, Rashad Bateman steps in to catch all the passes. So, yes. I like his role with the team. I like what he has to offer. I like the direction of the Ravens in general and the fact that they're actually upright. So I am higher on him than most people. I think he could be a legit wide receiver too this year.
I was in the barn for Rashad Bateman's debut in the NFL, and I was impressed. He catches the ball, he runs up the field, and those are 2 things that Marquise Brown didn't do.
He's fundamentally sound is what stood out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. A great pick by Eric DeCosta. So I think, maybe I feel like a lot of people might be sleeping on Rashad Bateman because it's sort of the narrative around the league that, the Ravens receiver room is just a bunch of bums, the Sammy Watkins types who play 1 game a year. But Rashad Bateman is in there, and, that narrative isn't true anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's also somewhat of an indictment by others, not of me, but of Lamar Jackson and his ability to throw to wide receivers. And need I remind you that he led the league in touchdown passes the year he won the MVP. He made Marquise Brown.
MVP.
He made Marquise Brown look like a guy that's worthy of trading a first-round pick for, even though he's not. And, I think Rashad Bateman's a better player than Marquise Brown. And if there's anything resembling 2019 for this Ravens offense, Rashad Bateman's going to be one of the guys that reaps the benefit of that.
Absolutely. Corey, you have anything to add on Rashad Bateman?
No, I like him. I think he's a really good player, and I think that his ADP being at 80 right now is way too low, and certainly I hope that it doesn't go too high because I wouldn't mind having him on at least one of my fantasy teams this year. But
along with Christian Kirk,
along
boy.
with Christian Kirk, but
and Travis Etienne.
Like Bateman is one of those guys that I kind of have that we have consensus ranked sort of near Christian Kirk that I would take ahead of Christian Kirk.
Okay. Eric, defend Darnell Mooney. I shorted him a little bit, or I guess a lot, because he plays for the Bears, and the Bears are going to be terrible. Yeah. Just a clean sweep of negativity from me on anybody who plays for the Bears.
Well, I don't necessarily have the same level of consternation about the Bears. I think the rankings of these players, the Bears' lack of ability to score or do anything on offense is baked into the ADP as it is. But I also have maybe an irrational belief in Justin Fields to overcome, right? Like last year, he had no shot with a team that wasn't even interested in coaching him, let alone winning games. So I realized that the Bears haven't necessarily done anything to bolster that offense to a great degree, but Darnell Mooney is a legitimately good football player, and I think Justin Fields is a legitimately good football player, or at least will take the steps this year to become one of those great quarterbacks. I don't think he's going to be great by the numbers necessarily because the Bears are going to suck and they don't have the weaponry around him, but I think he's going to do what he has to do to at least keep one or two of his guys productive. And Darnell Mooney's the guy that he seems to have a rapport with. I trust him to make some plays. I feel like this is, I would be remiss to rank him, to quote Draymond Green, I would be remiss to rank him in the area that I'm picking my starting quarterback when I think he could be a legitimate flex option. So I've got him a little bit higher than the average, and you clearly see him as less than. You kind of bake him into like that 8-9 round situation where maybe he's a sleeper type of candidate. I think I've got a little bit more confidence that he's going to deliver on what his potential is to that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I initially had him ranked higher than Eric did, similar to Rashad Bateman, but I have cooled a bit on Darnell Mooney. I would say that he's probably like the guy I would be okay getting him next after Christian Kirk. But at this point, I would prefer to have Christian Kirk on my team than Darnell Mooney.
But that's still kind of around where I rank him,
yeah,
so we're kind of on the same page.
Yeah.
We're just not on the same page on Christian Kirk.
Apparently not.
Y'all also aren't on the same page about J.K. Dobbins. Eric, you're plus 14 against ADP. I'm plus 30. Perhaps, I'm licensed distributor of Purple Kool-Aid, as you know, but the Ravens are going to run the rock. There's going to be no shortage of carries to go around between Lamar and Dobbins, and Ravens signed Mike Davis for some reason. Talked about him being a bum. He's still in the league. There's plenty of carries to go around, plenty of guys to get touches. The offensive line is supposed to be healthy. Knock on some wood there. I mean, it's full steam ahead.
Okay, well, since you've defended my pick for me, thank you for that.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm higher on J.K. Dobbins is because what little we saw of him, or little, he did play a full season, but he was kind of stuck in a backfield by committee with Mark Ingram. But he has game-breaking speed, game-breaking talent, and with an offense like the Ravens where running backs are going to see so many more big holes because of the fear of Lamar Jackson, because he pulls on the defense when he does a read option type of play where he could take the ball and run it himself. Those holes are best exploited by somebody who can get through the line of scrimmage and just get downhill and be off to the races. And J.K. Dobbins resembles that to me a lot. And so I think you've got a lot of potential to see him, busting through the line and a lot of 25 to 35-yard carries from him, if not just going all the way to the end zone. I think he's going to have a big year.
All right. So the guys that Corey picked out for me, so like the people who I am higher on than the average draft position, I am really high.
Yes, you are.
I've got some questions
guys.
here, bro.
Yeah,
especially with the first one.
Yeah, I'll start with the first one. So it turns out I do like that. I am 62 spots above ADP on Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins could lead the league in passing yards this year. Like Corey's making a face.
I'm making a worse face.
Yeah, Eric's face is even more crazy than mine is. You just don't see it, Evan.
Yeah, they're both making faces. That's fine. I rank Kirk Cousins this high because I think he's going to lead the league in passing. I mean, we already know how great Justin Jefferson is going to be. We'll get to Adam Thielen in a minute. But the Vikings got a new coach this year, and their old coach was Mike Zimmer, and he was a defensive guy and stuff. And he and Kirk Cousins also hated each other.
Apparently.
But that's beside the point. Their new coach was the offensive coordinator of the Rams, and all the Rams did was throw the ball. They're going to be throwing it all over the place. This is why I was a little bit lower on Dalvin Cook this season, just because I feel like the Vikings are going to throw it a whole bunch. Now, maybe I took too big of a bite, at the apple here.
Maybe.
But yeah, I'm a big believer in this Vikings passing offense. Is the Vikings defense going to be good? They're going to have to throw it a lot.
Big believer in Kirk Cousins. Those are two phrases that shouldn't be in the same sentence unless there's a negative.
I drafted him last night, Eric.
And did you draft him in the 5th round like you have him ranked here?
No, it was like the 12th round or something.
Oh, well, so
that was an 8-team league, to be fair, but
it was an 18 league.
Still, that doesn't move the needle that much.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
All right,
a tier 1 quarterback for me is just available. I'm like, oop, I'll take him.
All right, so the idea that the Rams offensive coordinator, since he threw the ball last year with the Rams, is going to do the same thing with the Vikings, I'm not sure I believe that, because the Rams were working with the personnel they had. They had a quarterback who's always been a volume thrower. They had a bunch of good receivers, including the best receiver in the league in Cooper Kupp, right? They didn't have a bell cow running back. I mean, they had Darrell Henderson out there who was fine, and they had Sony Michel taking snaps, and he's not that good. And Cam Akers came back later, but he's coming off of a torn Achilles, and he kind of sucked. So, the Rams kind of did what they had to do. We saw what the Rams did when they had somebody like Todd Gurley, literally Todd Gurley, and they pounded the rock with him. Now the Vikings and this offensive coordinator / head coach now has Dalvin Cook. He would, again, to quote Draymond Green, he would be remiss to not use Dalvin Cook as much as possible. And I don't know. I know Justin Jefferson's great, but I don't know if Adam Thielen, we'll get to him in a little bit. I feel like he might be toast, man. Like, he struggles to stay healthy. Toast. Like, he has hammy issues every week, it seems. He's getting a lot older. I'm fading him pretty heavily. And frankly, Kirk Cousins as a 5th round pick, like that guy better be like a top 2 or 3 quarterback in fantasy in order to justify that pick.
One guy to justify that pick, quite honestly.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, yeah.
That's what I said.
Are we sure? Are we sure? Like, are we sure the Yankees are going to win the division?
Are we sure about any of this stuff?
Are we sure that Kirk Cousins?
We're less sure about this than we are just about anything else in fantasy.
Yeah, like this feels like over boogieing a little bit on Kirk Cousins. I mean, and also you mentioned the fact that
you are familiar with his oeuvre, aren't you, Evan?
Yes.
And his oeuvre is not a top 3 fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, so
Never been a top 3
But
fantasy
something has
quarterback.
changed.
What has changed?
he's still the same mediocre
coach.
player. Who cares about the coach? He's still not that good.
Oh,
Still not that good. And the issue of Kirk Cousins and Mike Zimmer hating each other, well, the fact is they hated each other because Kirk Cousins is an asshole. So typically when you're an asshole, the new guy's going to hate you sooner or later too. So I don't really think that makes a big difference. Like, Kirk Cousins is a clown. And, I'm not going to sit there and say, well, just because Zimmer's gone, that's going to magically make Kirk Cousins feel better about himself. He's still the same goofy clown he always was, and I don't trust him anywhere nearly as much as you do, apparently.
okay. Well, we already mentioned Adam Thielen. I ranked Adam Thielen high just for all the same reasons as Kirk Cousins. Rising tide lifts all boats, and Adam Thielen is one of the other boats. I honestly think y'all are sleeping on Adam Thielen.
So,
I think y'all been sleeping on Adam Thielen for
I'm
like
definitely doing the
10
opposite. I've got
years.
him as a do not draft.
So let's see. Kirk Cousins, for me, I have him ranked at 125. He is my QB 13.
So he's not even a starter.
So he's not even a starter for me.
I rank Kirk Cousins QB number 7.
Then why is he a 5th-round pick for you?
How early are you taking quarterbacks, Evan? This is for a
I
12-team half PPR league. What are you doing?
Oh.
You're missing out on some running backs and wide receivers here, my friend.
Oh.
You're going to have a tough time defending that title belt if you're going to play it like this, man. Like,
Maybe I fat-fingered something. But, it's possible.
57.
Where was your first quarterback ranked?
Yeah, who was your
I
first
don't
guy?
know.
I'm assuming Josh Allen is your number 1, and you
Yeah.
have him at 32. That's not
Okay.
egregious.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. I
But
think
then you
I
have all your other quarterbacks
did him in
almost like-
chunks.
Yeah, in chunks.
Yeah, I mean that's how I did most of them. Like, I was like, oh well, let me pick some running backs, and then I get to like a tier break, or what I thought was a tier break, and then I pick a couple of different position
You might have
tier
to
break.
quarterbacks in your tier 1 then.
Yeah, I have 7 tier 1 quarterbacks. Got 2 of them last night. Anyway, I missed the Alan Lazard. I think people are sleeping on Alan Lazard as well.
Yeah, I like Alan Lazard. I've got him 29 ahead of ADP.
Yeah, I'm plus 48. The Packers, like they got rid of Devontae Adams, or he left on his own, or however, whatever
They got
words
rid
you
of
want to use.
MVS. Marcus
MVS is
Scantling is gone.
yes,
He's
all
with the
3 of them are
Chiefs,
gone.
Right? I think he's with the Chiefs over there with Juju.
The Chiefs are the leading exporter of guys with hyphenated last names.
The Packers
Like
should
they
be
have-
that too.
Importer.
Equiminius St.
Smith-Schuster.
Brown was the Packers are the exporters at this point because they Equiminius St. Brown and
Yeah,
Marcus
you're thinking
Falcon
importers
Sun.
for the Chiefs.
He's an importer exporter like Costanza.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
have,
no, I mean, I'm on the same page with you, Evan. I'm not quite as high on him just because I don't think that this offense is going to be that great. I mean, I understand we've got the rating 2-time MVP in a row in Aaron Rodgers coming back. And you've still got Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, which was a pretty good backfield tandem last year. I mean, Aaron Jones is another year older. I think that he's going to kind of fall back a little bit, but I also think that A.J. Dillon is going to take a step forward like he did last year. So I think that the running situation is probably going to be about, on the same level that it was last year. But as far as receivers, they don't really have a whole lot. That said, they do have Alan Lazard, who at least has some of a rapport with Aaron Rodgers because they have played together in the past. And Aaron Rodgers has come out and said definitively that Lazard is the number 1. It's not going to be old-ass Randall Cobb, who used to be really good with the Packers and then was kind of okay with the Cowboys and then didn't do anything until he came back to the Packers last year and still wasn't really fantasy relevant. And it's not going to be any of the other slew of guys that they've got in their wide receiver room. It's going to be this guy. And Aaron Rodgers is good enough of a quarterback that he'll get the ball to his number 1 target. But defenses are going to be able to key in on him, and that is going to cap the upside a little bit.
Yeah, that's sort of my question about him is, we know that he's capable of making some plays as second or third best wide receiver on the field, but you're being vaulted into the wide receiver 1 role, and with that comes opportunity, but that also comes attention. And are you talented enough to be able to get open at that point when that extra attention is coming towards you?
He might be.
And yeah,
he's shown enough flashes that I think that there's a legitimate chance that he could be that good. But we haven't actually seen it happen yet.
Right.
And so you want to kind of, you don't want to just throw all your eggs in that basket. You got to, temper those expectations a little bit. So, I'm with you, Evan. I like him a lot. I think that he's got a great opportunity this year, but I'm not quite as gung-ho on him.
Yeah, I think my issue with this is I think philosophically the Packers are going to be a lot different this year. And I think it stems from multiple things. I think, number one, I feel like I've said it for a couple of years now. The Packers have built their team in a manner that doesn't really suit where they play, right? Like, they're a finesse pass-first team, have been pretty much Rodgers' entire career for obvious reasons. Rodgers has been great. But they play at Lambeau Field in January, and the field's frozen. The ball is stiff. Nobody can really move. The passing attack is what takes the biggest hit. And we saw that sort of play out in their playoff game against the 49ers last year. They couldn't move the ball down the field. Frankly, neither could the 49ers. They had Jimmy G, who sucks. But, generally passing was not much of an option in that game, or at least it wasn't a great option.
It was snowing.
Yeah, it was a very nasty weather game, and that's the type of game that the Packers normally want to get in because it's at Lambeau. It gives them a big home field advantage, but it also sort of compromises, what they want to do offensively. And number two, the personnel is just completely different. Their offensive line is still really good. Their running backs are excellent. Aaron Jones is very good at this point as a solid veteran. And A.J. Dillon last year showed, the Packers, I think, made a mistake drafting him with a second-round pick, not because he's not good enough, but because they had other needs. But he's still a second-round draft pick who's entering, I think, his third year in the league.
Yep.
Like, this is a guy who could break out. I mean, he showed last year he was a worthwhile player for me, despite the fact that he wasn't even getting the bulk of the carries because he had a really good running back in front of him in Aaron Jones, and he was still fantasy relevant. So, there's going to be more running. Their defense is built to be great. That's something the Packers really focused on to make their defense one of the best in the league. I think it's going to surprise people. So I think the Packers are going to be a little bit more of a blue-collar, run the ball, ground and pound type of team. And Aaron Rodgers is going to have a lesser role in the offense because he's pushing 40. The team is designed to run the ball and play defense, and his receivers aren't that good. So I just feel like everybody that is involved in the passing game with the Packers is taking a little bit of a downgrade. Like, I found it interesting, the fact that yesterday I drafted Aaron Rodgers as my second quarterback.
I've got Aaron Rodgers as my QB 14. I have him one spot below Kirk Cousins on my QB list.
Yeah, so he's in a 12-team league, according to Corey. He's not even a starter.
No. And
I'm in a 10-team league, and I drafted him as my second quarterback. I picked Dak ahead of him, and you guys know I'm not in love with Dak by any means. But, yeah, so I just worry a little bit about this Packers passing attack being super heavy fantasy-wise. But at the same time, it's Rodgers. And Lazard's the number one, and you figure he's going to make it work at some level. So he's a good player to draft for sure, and he could prove us, or could prove me, completely wrong. Like, he could just end up being great, and Rodgers could throw the ball over the field. And we're talking about a completely different situation come December. So I think he's definitely a good sleeper option. I wouldn't necessarily use an early pick on him, but
I have him ranked as a really good flex.
That could be. I think that could be where he ends up being. I don't see that as being crazy. I worry about how much usage he's really going to get because the number one receiver in Aaron Rodgers' offense has a lot of shine to it, but it's also not what it used to be.
Yeah. I just think that people are drafting Alan Lazard as if Devontae Adams is still there. And
yeah, I mean, at a
we're missing out. Like,
ADP,
this
maybe,
is the number one guy.
But there are some legitimate concerns. So,
okay. we've got some guys who have been picked out that or some of
You
us.
haven't gotten to Adam Thielen, your boy.
Yeah, defend your
Your
boy.
other
Talked
boy.
about him already. Yeah.
We did
When
kind
did you
of
talk about him? You said I'll
With
get
the
to
Kirk
him later.
Cousins.
No, you mentioned him and said I'll get to him later.
I said we'll get to him later because I saw him on the list, but we did kind of touch.
I
on
also said I would get to him later, and we did get to him.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which podcast are you listening to right now?
He's busy producing. Cut him a break.
Yeah. Okay. Well, might not cut you a break on this one. Players to avoid. Your first one, Georgia Tech guy Darren Waller,
Your
sorry,
boy,
man.
Evan.
minus 54. Yo, what's going on here?
Darren Waller is my tight end 6. It's not terrible, but he's got some injury issues right now that he's working with. I mean, he has not been on the practice field in the better part of at least a month. So I have some.
That was going to be my question to you. Get hurt.
Yeah, so I have some serious concerns about his health. But also last year, he had a bit of a down year compared to what we had seen from him 2 years ago and 3 years ago when he was, a guy who you could legitimately make an argument to take him as the tight end 1 in a draft. Like, you could actually make an argument that was pretty convincing that you should take him over Travis Kelce just 2 or 3 years ago. This year, not so much. Even with even injuries notwithstanding, after kind of the flub that he put out there last year, I have him in that kind of middle tight end range where I don't really want to be the guy who he falls to. If he falls to me, around number 100, I guess I'll take him. But I definitely don't like him anywhere near his current ADP of 47. That makes him a 4th round player. I definitely don't like him there.
I have Darren Waller as tight end 6 as well.
So
Interesting.
So you might have your tight ends ranked a little bit too high too, just like your quarterbacks.
Okay. Probably.
That could be playing into it a little bit, Evan. But still, I mean, I don't think that explains away 53 spot difference between us because you only have him 1 behind his ADP, and I have him 54.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, is the main issue injuries? Are you concerned about Devontae Adams being on that team now?
And what happened last year, and not to mention the fact that Devontae Adams is now going to be in that offense. Now you have a really good wide receiver 1 who's going to be taking away a decent target share. So, I mean, it really is a mix of all of that. I mean, like, there are other tight ends that I have ranked behind him, like TJ Hawkinson and Dallas Goedert and Dawson Knox, who I would actually rather have on my team. Maybe not necessarily, I might have them ranked lower as far as where I think that they're going to fall, but I would rather have them at their current value compared to Darren Waller, where most people are valuing him.
Okay.
In other words, I'd rather have Dawson Knox in the 8th, 9th, maybe 10th round. I don't think he'll be falling that far, but I'd rather have Dawson Knox in the 8th or 9th round than Darren Waller in the 4th.
I think I have Waller as my TE4. Unfortunately, I'm working on the phone, so I can't filter.
Yeah, I went through and added number. I made a copy of the spreadsheet and then I added all the numbers into mine so that I can better see where I have people ranked by position.
Yes, I was VLOOKUP-ing my rankings in there, and I thought I was being lazy by doing that.
VLOOKUP-ing or VLOOKING up?
I guess VLOOKING up is more correct. Yeah, the function is called VLOOKUP, so if you want to slap an ing on the end of it. Anyway, the point is, Darren Waller to me is still one of the more talented and speedy tight ends. He's one of the best pass catching tight ends in the league. So I understand it dipped from the previous years where we had him at TE2, which I'm pretty sure was the consensus last year was he was the second best tight end behind Travis Kelce. And given what he had done before, I think that was appropriate. But a certain level of drop-off after the season he had, plus some changes with the Raiders, is probably to be expected. But we also know that Derek Carr does like to use the tight end. So even with Devontae Adams' presence there, I still think that there's going to be opportunities for Darren Waller. He's not going to be phased out of the offense. And I think this team's going to have to pass the ball because Josh Jacobs, frankly, to me, I don't think he's that good. So the running game, I don't think it's going to be special by any means. We know Josh McDaniels is certainly used to running systems that involve the tight end plenty when he was in New England. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities. I think Derek Carr is pretty good. So I'm willing to still keep him among the tight ends that you sort of go off schedule for, right? Like there's a certain group of guys that, you know, a lot of times when I look at tight ends, either I'm going for them early or I'm waiting. Like there's no real in between where I say, okay, maybe I'll get him in the 7th or 8th round. If I'm not picking you by then, I'm typically waiting to the 9th or 10th round to get you, because at that point they're all basically the same, so you might as well get some depth. I still consider him among the first group of tight ends where you're willing to actually say, I'll give up a wide receiver too and maybe compromise that position because this guy adds a little bit more value. I still see him among that rank. He's not a 2nd-round pick or a 3rd-round pick like he was last year by any means, but certainly keep him in the top 60, I would say, is still reasonable for Darren Waller.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you agree. You didn't agree. You had him like in the 100s.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh,
So just saying stuff. Corey's paying so much attention.
again, which podcast are you listening to right now?
This is gonna be a great time on Friday when we're calling the game and I just say some nonsense and Corey's like, agreed. I'm like, the smartest guy in the world. I don't know anything about these guys, so can't wait for that.
Yeah. Cam Akers. Now we're all a little down on Cam Akers, but Corey, you're the most down on Cam Akers. Why is that?
Yeah,
Why is that?
This really just comes from the injury issues. He came back at the end of last season and played in the playoffs, and I think he
fumbled again.
He played okay in the first game, if I remember correctly, but after that, it was awful. I mean, it was really bad, and apparently he's had some setbacks during training camp and the preseason. At this point, we don't know for sure that he's going to start week 1. There's a big question about that. I mean, that was part of the reason why I was, like J.K. Dobbins, you and Eric were both high on him compared to ADP, and I was low on him compared to ADP because there's some concern about whether he's even going to be available week 1, and how soon after that he might actually be available, when he'll be at full health, because we've heard about Gus Edwards having setbacks, but now we're starting to see some question marks about J.K. Dobbins and just how far along with his recovery is. We're kind of seeing the same thing with Cam Akers out in L.A.
There are questions about J.K. Dobbins? He's not on the PUP list or anything.
He's not on the PUP list, but Harbaugh refuses to say whether he's going to be available week 1. And he's been refusing to answer questions about that for a few days now.
Harbaugh doesn't answer any questions about anything.
Well,
he's just up there talking, saying
stuff. It's got some people nervous, and it's got me a little bit nervous.
Our guys work their tails off in practice, and we're gonna play to the echo of the whistle. All the coach mumbo jumbo. He never says anything.
In any case, we're seeing some similar stuff with Cam Akers. Based on what we saw in the playoffs, I don't know that he's going to be the same player that he was before his injury. He might be, but I don't trust it enough to draft him where he is currently being drafted in most fantasy drafts.
Okay. I can't say that I disagree that much.
There's guys I would rather have ahead of him. I have Kareem Hunt right there with him, who I would consider taking ahead of him. I have Chase Edmonds ahead of him, of course, A.J. Dillon, Cordell Patterson, Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, David Montgomery. All those guys I have ahead of Cam Akers. So I think Cam Akers is an RB2 for me, barely. But I'm not confident in him right now.
Okay.
I mean, I get that. Like, there's no doubt, especially a lot of pause given after what we saw from him last postseason. And when you're hearing not so great stuff coming out of camp, that doesn't reinforce good vibes. But we also did see him, towards the tail end of the 2020 season, and he looked incredible. So I don't want to dismiss that potential to return to that level of prominence, because if he's ever gets to that level of player, that's a first-round pick, in my opinion. Like, if he's at that level, obviously we're a long way from that, and we haven't seen it in a while, but he has that kind of potential as a running back. So, drafting a guy who you think is going to be the starting running back for a good offense in the 4th round still seems reasonable to me, even if you have some trepidation.
It's fair.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any disagreements there, really. I'd just be repeating what Jill said. Elijah Mitchell next for Corey's do not draft list.
Well, and to be fair, like, none of these guys are really like a do not draft. It's just they don't draft where most people are drafting him right now. So I've got him.
Yeah. Sort of a love-hate type thing.
Yeah, and there's somebody changed, or maybe I had a fat finger in the ADP, but his ADP right now is 48, not 19. I have him ranked 19 spots below his current ADP. Eric has him +1. Evan, you're actually even a little bit lower on Elijah Mitchell than I am. So Elijah Mitchell is my RB27. That means that he's a flex option, and honestly barely so, because I have 32 wide receivers ranked ahead of him. So that makes him basically the number, 59 skill position player. And we have 60 of them.
So he's a bad flex.
So he's a bad flex, right? He is a flex. He's barely in there. But the only guy who I would have as a flex behind him is Amari Cooper.
Yeah, and in that situation,
that's the list.
In that situation, he's not a week-to-week starter. He's
right.
A matchup player.
Yeah, he's a guy that sometimes you're going to start somebody else. You're going to start Gabriel Davis sometimes, and honestly, Gabriel Davis could shoot way up from where he is right now. I have him ranked below him right now, but he has the potential to shoot way up, much more so than Elijah Mitchell does, in my opinion. Now, San Francisco runs the ball a lot, so there is that. And Elijah Mitchell is most likely going to be the dude doing most of that running, unless Deebo Samuel also handles all of the running responsibilities, which is within the range of possibilities, but probably is not what's going to happen. But there's a lot of questions to me there, because you also have a quarterback there who is going to be doing a lot of running. Like Trey Lance likes to run the ball. I have some questions about Trey Lance's. Trey Lance is a number. I think he's my QB 10 purely because of his ability to run the ball. I don't think that he's going to be throwing the ball a ton, so a lot of the running opportunities are going to come from him as well, which is going to cut into some of Elijah Mitchell's opportunities to run the ball, in my opinion. So I just have some concerns about him. I feel like I haven't seen enough of him to really feel like he's guaranteed to keep the number 1 spot in that offense. Obviously, there's some other running backs who have been in that room who are now gone, guys like Raheem Mostert. But I don't feel like I've seen enough of him to be able to say, like this is the guy in that offense to handle the running back responsibilities.
Yeah, I'm obviously gonna disagree, because I'm the only one that's not down on Elijah Mitchell. One, we know 49ers running game usually works out pretty well. We've seen it with Raheem Mostert, but they specifically drafted Elijah Mitchell to come in and be a running back for them. And when he got on the field last year and was able to get some opportunities, he was great, right? Like 4.7 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown, only had 207 carries, but still almost had a 1,000-yard season. Like the talent is there, and ultimately I think the talent's going to win out. He's going to earn himself a steady role in that offense throughout the year. So I still believe in him as a regular starter, an RB2 type of player for sure. So that's where I'm sticking with him. I think I actually think he's got pretty good upside. I mean, he could be a league winner.
I'm more with my concern with Elijah Mitchell is, not his talent, but the amount of opportunity he's going to get, because the 49ers they have no idea week to week or this is how I feel anyway. They have no idea week to week or play to play who's going to be their running back at that particular time. Like it could be Elijah Mitchell, could be Trey Sermon, could be somebody nobody we've ever even heard of.
I do feel like
Could be
the train
could be
has kinda
somebody
come and
who
gone on
stumbled
Trey
over
Sermon.
from California's Great America, made a wrong turn. Like, oh, you get the ball now. It could be anybody. So it's the range of outcomes for me. Like this guy, he could be inexplicably riding the pine one week, and that's the week you need him. So that's my concern with Elijah Mitchell, not his ability. Like we saw, he's a pretty good player last year, but what are the 49ers doing? It's a revolving door.
Yeah, but the thing is, even when it was revolving door, when it was Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman running the ball, those guys were splitting carries throughout the game. Whereas towards the end of the season last year, we saw Mitchell toting the rock 20 times a game and having 100-plus yard rushing days and things like that. He's shown that he is capable of shouldering a big load for that offense and being very productive. So I think I'm trending
He's
more.
shown that to Kyle Shanahan.
Well, he's trending more towards that than the opposite, I think. Eventually, you've got to settle on a running back. And the reason why there's been such a revolving door is partially due to injuries. Tevin Coleman couldn't stay healthy with them. Raheem Mostert suffered an injury. And Trey Sermon just wasn't that good. So, you've actually got somebody who we presume is going to stay healthy. That's a big presumption with any football player because football's a dangerous and violent sport that we probably shouldn't play, but we do. As I'm,
We don't. We watch.
well, we watch while other people do, which is probably even more bad. Like we might be bad people after all. Are we the baddies? But as far as we know, Elijah Mitchell doesn't have an injury history that's worthy to get worried about, and we know he can certainly play when he's on the field. So I think that he is the type of player that could buck the trend of just having a different running back every week. I think he's the guy. Now, if you don't believe that, I know exactly where you guys are coming from because you don't want to pick the 49ers running back that starts for the first 3 games and suddenly, we don't really like him anymore, or he's splitting carries with somebody else and now you're hosed. But I just don't see that happening with him. I think he's going to be a valuable pick.
Okay. Continue with you, Eric.
Oh, me.
All three of your, so-called do not draft guys on this list are quarterbacks. Is there any reason that you are below the ADP other than you typically want to wait on quarterbacks?
Well, and another thing is all 3 of these guys you agree with me on.
Yeah.
Both of you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
this is going to be a whole lot of...
Basically, the thing for Eric was that he wasn't significantly. So there were some players on the list that he was like way lower than ADP on. But what I focused on with the players to target, the draft steals, was guys that we have in or very close to our first 5 rounds, but are being drafted way later than that by ADP. For the players to avoid segment, what I did was players that we like or that are being drafted within the first 4 rounds, but we like less than that. And there were only those are really the only 3 players who are being drafted in the first 4 rounds that Eric was kind of low on. So he doesn't really, I don't think he hates any of these players. He certainly doesn't hate Josh Allen or Justin Herbert. I don't think he hates Patrick Mahomes as a fantasy quarterback either.
No.
I don't either. I think that Evan, you hit the nail on the head. I think it really just comes down to we don't think that we should be taking quarterbacks that early.
Yeah.
We're missing out too much on other positions, and those early quarterbacks you might not hit on. You might get the wrong guy, and so I'd rather make sure that I'm getting plenty of depth at my running back and wide receiver positions. Because if I wait and I get I'm the 8th or 9th person in my league to take a quarterback, well, I can take another quarterback a little bit later, and one of the two is probably going to wind up outperforming his not only his ADP but even where I had him ranked.
Yeah, you get 2 lottery tickets instead of 1. So, to speak to the specific quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes ADP of 33, and I've got him at 48. Corey's got him significantly lower than I have him, and Evan's got him at 42.
Yeah.
So, Evan and I are kind of in the same boat. Corey's a little bit less interested in Mahomes, but
Well, Mahomes is my QB. He's my QB5.
Like, the issue I have with this is the fact that this might be a philosophical difference when it comes to ADP on quarterbacks. And in Mahomes' case, it might also be a case of, you skate where the puck is going, not where the puck has been. And I still think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the world. Like, I don't think that's really a question.
No.
Like, I think if you
agree.
say otherwise, I'm going to say, okay, you're either a Bills fan, a Packers fan, or a Bucks fan, or maybe you are a clinger to Tom Brady from New England or something like that. Like, other than that, you don't really have a case. And you don't really have a case in those cases either. You're just being a homer. Mahomes, best quarterback in the world. And I think that his performance this year is going to reflect that in terms of efficiency, in terms of offensive production. But he's not going to be a fantasy dynamo like he has been because he doesn't have Tyreek Hill anymore. And that was the guy that he could just throw a laser beam to, whether he's 5 yards down the field or 65 yards down the field, and have it turn into a touchdown because Tyreek Hill is a special player as well as Patrick Mahomes. Not having that sort of takes away some of his upside and makes him more of a good quarterback for fantasy versus a let me go get that guy in lieu of a receiver or a running back that's going to be in my starting lineup every week.
He also doesn't have a Travis Kelce that has some attention taken away from him by Tyreek Hill. So
That's true.
Travis Kelce, I think that's part of the reason why, Mark Andrews is being taken by almost everybody ahead of Travis Kelce in drafts this year, is not just because of how good Mark Andrews was last year and the fact that he did wind up being the tight end one, but also because I think people expect a slight slip back by Travis Kelce because he's going to have more attention on him because who else is going to draw eyes from the defense?
Well, Travis Kelce's the most accredited player in the receiving corps for...
Like Juju Smith-Schuster has been very good in football before, but last year he was terrible, and I don't expect him to take a huge step.
He's never been as good as Tyreek Hill, no question.
No.
He's
And
never been as good as Travis
MVS
Kelce.
is not that guy either.
No.
Like there's nobody.
Nicole
in that
Hardman,
offense.
like come on, like
There's nobody in that offense who can take, who's going to spread the defense the way that Tyreek Hill could, leaving the middle of the field wide open for Travis Kelce to just sit there and wait for Mahomes to run around in the backfield and finally throw back across his body and find him with nobody near him.
yeah,
That's not going to happen.
I feel like Travis Kelce is a player who the fantasy impact on him could be closer to neutral, in my opinion, than a lot of people think, because he's going to get a lot of targets. Like Mahomes is going to look his way, and for a half PPR league or a full PPR league, that's going to pay dividends.
But it's still going to hurt Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it's going to hurt Mahomes, and it's going to hurt Kelce as far as real football goes in terms of productivity, DVOA, things like that. And that ties more closely to a quarterback's production because a quarterback can only pay off his drives if they score, right? And they have to move the ball presumably 75, 80 yards to score. And that's going to be much more difficult to do in one play or several plays without Tyreek Hill, because another thing that Patrick Mahomes really took advantage of is Mahomes is a mobile quarterback. He can scramble, he can get out and run. But how many times do we see teams running man coverage and their backs are all turned 40 yards down the field because they're chasing Tyreek Hill, and Mahomes just takes off and runs and nobody reacts until he's like 5 yards downfield. And so what would have normally been a 7 or 8 yard scramble, step out of bounds, turns into a 25-yard, get up and go type of situation. Those go away. Yeah. And those
that's significant for a quarterback.
That's significant for the yardage that he gets, and that's significant because he's not going to be able to extend drives that way, because that happens so many times where teams thought they had Mahomes dead to rights. They're backed up. It's 3rd and 16, and he takes off and runs, and he's got nobody in front of him. He picks up the first down. Now that's getting stopped at 4th and 8, and they have to punt. And so now you've lost probably 7 or 8 more plays, which could include a touchdown and 40 to 50 more yards on that drive. So you've now lost a big opportunity to score more and more points. And if that happens even once a game, that takes away potentially 5 points off of his total. And at that point, he goes from being spectacular to just pretty good. And that's where I have him ranked as pretty good. So I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you on that, Eric.
All right. It's time for me to defend myself. I've got Breece Hall minus 60. This was, probably an overreaction, but it's really more of what I said about Le'Veon
Yeah,
Bell as well.
I was just about to say, is this Le'Veon Bell the ghost?
I will say
Yeah.
I was actually because I've got him ranked where I have him ranked because I typically don't go crazy with these things. With as you guys clearly can see, I'm not going nuts with I really hate this guy or I really love this guy. But yesterday in my draft, Breece Hall was available to me or potentially available, I should say, and my pick was coming up, and I let out a sigh of relief when the person in front of me picked him. I was like, okay, good. I don't have to sweat picking a Jets running back here. I can pick somebody I feel more confident in, even though I maybe think Breece Hall has the upside. But yes, I totally understand not being interested in a Jet. That checks out.
The one
Particularly
thing,
a Jets running back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to throw out there that this is not the same Jets that Le'Veon Bell played for. This is not Adam Gase. This is Robert Saleh, who we all think is a decent coach.
Yeah,
right?
but are we sure?
We're not sure that he's a really good coach.
Are we sure he's decent, though? Are we sure?
I think he's decent. I think that they've made a few moves with their offensive line in the offseason that's going to make the team a little bit better than it was.
Didn't Becton get hurt?
Yeah,
Yeah, he
Mekhi
did.
Becton did get hurt, and that definitely is a big loss. But isn't Mekhi Becton the left tackle? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's the left tackle, which means that his primary job is pass blocking. So they still got their run blockers for the most part. Not that he's not a good run blocker too, but that's usually not the main focus of a left tackle.
Yeah, but that still indirectly affects.
Still got a block.
It still indirectly affects the running back's production because we just talked about it. If the drive stalls because the backup left tackle gets Zach Wilson sacked or gets him off his spot and they have to
It's
punt,
holding.
that takes away touchdown opportunities and opportunities for more plays. So there is always an indirect relationship, even if the guy isn't necessarily getting the hole for you or not. It's still a factor. It affects the overall offense when the left tackle is out.
All right. Another guy who I'm out on just because of the team he plays for,
This
David
was your
Montgomery.
boy. Oh wait, you're skipping somebody.
Yeah,
Who's skipping?
because they're similar. Same reason.
He skipped
David
Josh
Montgomery.
Jacobs.
We'll get to him in a minute.
Okay, he's saving him for
Way
last.
out on
All
him.
right, I was about to say
Yeah.
because he used to be your boy.
Yeah, no. David Montgomery, just because he's on the Bears don't need to worry about winning too many games this season. So that means they're not going to be leading too many games this season, and you're more likely to just pound the run when you're ahead and trying to chew up the clock. So, no David Montgomery for me. All right, Josh Jacobs. I've been with Josh Jacobs. I mean,
Since the
it's
beginning.
been. Yeah,
Since he was a
since he was,
rook.
I think since he was a rookie when they're still in Oakland and stuff.
You were definitely getting excited about having him his second year.
You might have drafted him when he was still at Alabama. Just
Yeah, Josh Jacobs used to be my boy, but
Not anymore.
turns out we are never, ever, ever, ever getting back together. It's over, man. Like it's
Rashawn
just
will hate that line.
yeah, it's just not gonna happen.
you gonna
Okay,
buy
this
our
guy's
new
been
album
given-
when it comes out? It's coming out.
Yeah.
Dropping a new record.
It's just he's gotten
That's gonna
every possible opportunity, and then he's done nothing with it. And it got to the point where Gruden didn't seem like he trusted him anymore. They never threw him the ball, so even in a PPR, half PPR situation, you're getting nothing there. It's over, man. It's
Just like a
there's
Dos
there's
Equis
nothing here.
commercial.
Yeah.
So Eric and
I've seen firsthand he's been on my teams and just disappointed me year after year after year. I'm like, you know what? We're done. Any of y'all can draft him if you want. He's not going to be on my team anymore.
Eric and I are definitely not on the same page with you. Now Eric is a little bit lower on Josh Jacobs than his ADP. I think Eric's got him at 54. His ADP is 45. I have him at 44, so basically right in line with his current ADP. I mean, Is he going to be an RB1? Absolutely not. Is he going to be an RB2? Probably not.
No.
I think specifically I have him at, let's see. He's my RB20. So I have him as an RB2, but he's not like a high-end RB2. He's not even really like square in the middle RB2. He's on the lower end of that.
I have him running back 29.
You know, and so like
behind Clyde
guys
Edwards
that I
Helaire.
have ranked shortly behind him at running back are Cordell Patterson, A.J. Dillon, Chase Edmonds, Cam Akers, Kareem Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then Elijah Mitchell, who we talked about earlier. Any or all those guys could potentially jump ahead of Josh Jacobs, and it wouldn't completely shock me. At the same time, he is the guy at running back in Las Vegas. There's not a number 2
He's been that
behind
for a
him.
long time.
I know that, but he has not been outside of the RB2 range as a running back in the past couple of years. He's been disappointing compared to where he's been taken, but
He's been a pumpkin.
he is. But he's still been an RB2 in fantasy during that time. So I don't see any reason why he's just going to all of a sudden fall off a cliff. He's not going to get better at this point. I don't think that's going to happen. But I don't see any reason why he's not just going to kind of stay the same, decent if unexciting option at RB2 for you that he has been.
When
over the
was
past
he
couple
on
years.
top of the cliff to fall off of it? When was that?
When you put him there, I guess.
Yeah, had enough smoke blowing up his ass. He just kind of floated up there, and it just deflated. A not so funny story for me. It's not a bad story. It's a fantasy football.
Fall off a cliff
It's a
too?
fantasy football story. So how bad could it really be? It was 2020. So I was in my work league and I was drafting, and it was a Yahoo draft, and I hate Yahoo. Like I don't like Yahoo's draft
I don't know
room.
why so many people say it's the best platform. I don't like.
I don't
it.
agree. It was better. I had a better experience yesterday and in 2021, but 2020, I don't know what was going on. So I was targeting. I had the 9th pick, and so I was targeting Josh Jacobs around that pick, and I was hoping that somebody would maybe pass on him, so that I could get him, because I think the consensus was he was like 7th or 8th or something like that, and I see a bunch of names come off the board. I'm scratching them off. It gets to my pick, and Josh Jacobs is nowhere to be found on the list of running backs. I'm like, is this guy dead or something? Or, like, did something happen? And it's a 45-second clock, so I got to move. I can't find him. He's not in the ranking list.
They don't have a search bar.
It took me too long to find the search bar.
Oh, jeez.
Right? Like, I was like, where the hell is the
search
search
for
bar?
the search bar.
You got to know where the search bar is.
It's Yahoo, right? Like, I don't know where anything is. This all looks weird. And
Was this your first year in that league? Or was that your second year?
It might have been my second year, but
Okay.
I didn't have any issues like this. But, like, why the hell wasn't he ranked? So I end up saying, okay, I guess he's not around or something. I don't know where he's at. So I picked Clyde Edwards-Helaire instead, who was a rookie. And
He had a great first game.
he didn't score any touchdowns. He got stuffed on the goal line like 6 times.
Yeah, but minus the fumble, he still scored a lot of fantasy points.
That's true. But he wasn't great the whole year.
No, he
but
was
neither
not.
was Josh Jacobs. So I kind of look back at that and say, oh, so no matter what, I would have sucked. So I don't feel too bad. Yeah, so I that was not a situation where I was like, Josh Jacobs out here bulldozing people, and he's a top 5 running back. Meanwhile, I got this bum rookie who's already looking to be replaced. I mean, it didn't happen that way. I was fortunate, but I'm pretty anti Josh Jacobs as well.
All right. Sounds good.
Speaking of
All right,
a
talk
bad
about-
draft experience, Evan, you NFL.com. Oof. I mean, we got through it with the app, but the browser was not working. We could not access the draft room on any browser. I tried in Safari and Chrome. Somebody else was trying in whatever the new Microsoft one is called.
Edge.
Yeah, Edge. I think there was another one that was tried. I don't know if anybody tried Firefox, but yeah, it
think somebody
was,
tried
it
that
was
too.
completely inaccessible on browser.
Yeah, that was disappointing. I when I created this league in 2010, the NFL was running a whole bunch of ads talking about, how they had, like, while you're watching your fantasy stats pile up, you could watch the highlights at the same time. I think they still have that, but I don't
they
even
still have
really
that,
use
but,
that feature.
Nobody uses that feature. We all have either network TV or we have Red Zone.
Or we have Twitter,
Yeah,
where
or
the
Twitter.
highlights just pop up on there anyway.
Yeah.
But this was 2010, And, times have changed since then. But the NFL platform has been a little disappointing, and it was just really frustrating yesterday. The one day where the platform needs to work. The one day where it absolutely has to work, it doesn't work.
I've still been pretty happy with our decision on moving to Flea Flicker. I still really like the platform a lot. I know a lot of people
My preference
will
is...
say Sleeper. A lot of people are saying like Sleeper is kind of the place to be. And if we were doing a Dynasty League, I think I probably would move us over to Sleeper. But I've been really happy with Flea Flicker.
I don't know what any.
I think my preference is still ESPN. I do like Flea Flicker, though.
I know what Flea Flicker is because we're on it, but I have no idea what Sleeper is or anything like that.
Well, so Sleeper, when it first came out, it was like, I don't know if you ever got like the Sleeper app where it would alert people on like injuries, like very quick. Like it was like the quickest alert system for injuries to players. It's never that I had Sleeper for that, but then they developed their own fantasy platform. It's become pretty big, and a lot of people like who say if you go on Reddit and somebody's asking like what's a good platform to use, and somebody says Flea Flicker, like 10 people will come and say no, don't go to Flea Flicker, go to Sleeper. It's like bots.
Well, if it's bots, I don't care.
I don't know if they're actually bots, but like it feels like bots because they just like they swarm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What were we even talking about?
Fantasy football.
Ready to move on to to a new topic.
Oh, yeah. So, changing topics.
That was a great segue, by the way.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I don't even know what I said.
Okay.
No, I'm being sarcastic. That was a terrible segue. What were we talking about? Oh, let's go to the next topic. That's the opposite of a segue.
Okay. Anyway, rules ideas that Corey found on Reddit that we may or may not like. The first one on here, team captains nominate a non-quarterback each week as your captain. He gets 150% of his point total for that week only. Players can be captains only once all season, even if traded. This is way too much. Why? There's no point doing
what
this.
Platform even like offers this, or if you have
that
to
sounds
do this
exhausting.
Manually. Like, your players get what they get. This is what fantasy
I was tired just
is.
from reading that.
So I know that there's like sort of a version of this in certain forms of fantasy on like FanDuel, where there are games where you pick one of your players to be like the team captain, and they get either 1.5 times or maybe double their point total, and so it adds like this extra layer of, it's not just making sure that I guess like the right players to put in my lineup, but it's also guessing the right player that's going to be the highest score on my lineup who's a non-quarterback, so that I get the most points out of my lineup. I don't like it.
It's a gimmick. It's plain simple. It's all. It's a pointless gimmick. I mean,
and I like there are plenty of gimmicks that I can get behind in fantasy football. My league makes just keepers are not a gimmick. I don't think they're a gimmick, but like there are other gimmicks that we have implemented or thought about implementing. Like we're like the taxi
home
squad
field advantage. Remember that?
We got rid of that. We got rid of that when we started the current league, and we're not bringing that back.
I feel like I'm the league's biggest dissenter on things like this, because every time something bad happens, it's usually to me, and I'm like, why the hell did we do this? Like home field advantage, I lost a game because of that, and I was like, wait, why did I lose this game? It's like you just got 2 free points, and that put him okay. It's like I was like, can we? Like I wasn't really friends with Corey enough at the time to be like, Corey, this has got to go now. I was more like, Corey, can we maybe not do that? That's kind of cheap, and we didn't. So yeah, I think everybody agreed. That was dumb. Yeah, I felt like it was almost like set that way. Just
to me, having home field advantage is basically this. Like to me, it's the same as having a bonus for a 40-yard touchdown catch or 40-yard touchdown pass. Like, you're already getting more points than somebody else would be getting for throwing a shorter touchdown pass. Why do you need an additional bonus? Your bonus is that you made a better play. You made a bigger play.
Yeah, but even that, which I agree with what you just said, but at least that's still tied to the football game. It's not just some random, here's 2 free points. Yes. It's just like, come on.
Just for being like the designated home team, which means absolutely nothing in fantasy football.
Right, because like the thing is, like home field advantage in actual sports carries empirically an advantage, but you don't get extra points for being at home. You actually still have to go win. right? You still have to play the same game. It's just that the environment is more favorable to you. You still have to beat your opponent. The game starts 0-0, and who has the most points at the end wins. You don't get 2 freebies. Just like, here you go. Start off with that. No, that's not how it goes.
If we were actually like, if Eric and I were playing fantasy game and we were like actually at his house, then maybe it would make sense for him to get a home field advantage.
Yeah, if people are screaming in your face
Online.
while you're trying to set your lineup and yelling at you and cussing at you,
I have
and
to
they're
go to Eric's
Little
place
kids
to set
giving
my
you the
lineup.
finger on a bus.
and I lock the
your
door.
way
You
to-
gotta sneak your way into my house to use my Wi-Fi to set your lineup. Otherwise, it doesn't count.
That would actually be funny if everybody lived within a reasonable distance of each other, and like when you played against somebody that was the home team, you had to go to their house to set your lineup.
It sounds like a lot of damaged property about to happen there.
That
Go
sounds
to their
better
house.
than this team captain's idea, though.
Yeah, this is corny. I at first I
that's
thought it
corny.
was. At first I
That's the
thought it was
corny
going
one.
to be something like, you get to pick them every week. At which point I'm like, okay, so you just give the team with the first overall pick an even bigger advantage, right? Because if you have Christian McCaffrey and you say I get to, get 1.5 extra points, or per every one, or an extra half a point per one that he gets, and just cause.
We're all having trouble with math today.
Yeah, well, this is weird, right? Like, so it doesn't make any sense. But even if it's like every week you got to select somebody, it's like, does that encourage you to put somebody in your lineup that's a bench player so that maybe you can get a bonus because you can only do one guy per week?
Right, yeah.
But
Because
that's
eventually you're going to run out of
Yeah.
your main starters.
yeah, you've got 7 main starter or 6 if you exclude the quarterback. This is stupid. Like at this point, like I have to set my lineup differently because I want to try to squeeze some points out of some nonsensical flex starter that shouldn't be in my lineup.
Jamison Crowder.
What are we doing? No, just you pick your starters, you pick your bench players, you put the lineup together according to how you think it's going to go, and you'll see how it plays out. There's no reason to get cute. It's fantasy football. It's already cute.
Yeah. Extra points for 69-yard plays.
Nice.
The inner 12-year-old in me giggled, but other than that, doesn't matter.
No.
No, this is silly. I appreciate the effort, but silly.
I could understand if it's like extra points for any time that Rob Gronkowski has a 69-yard play.
Even
There's
so.
actually a connection there between him and that number. He loves that number.
We all love that number, though.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Moving on
So
before we
this-
get too inappropriate for this show. The Thanos League. I already think this is a dumb idea. After draft, random name selection site. What are we doing? Eliminates 50% of all players, leaving teams decimated and scrambling through waivers. Just playing a 16-team league, which yeah, just do that.
We've done before.
That was
Yeah, which are also missing players. Snap undone for players who make the title game, giving them their full drafted roster.
A+ for creativity.
The person who wrote this got really into it too. Like you could tell they were. There's some fanfic stuff where they're trying to.
Maybe they
interrelate
need to go to
Marvel.
their job.
Maybe
Like
this
I
is
said-
their job.
Like I said, A+ for creativity.
F
I don't
minus
like it.
for everything else.
Yeah.
I wish I had more hands so I could give that idea 4 thumbs down.
Yeah. Next, 6-point passing touchdowns. I would be fine with that, but 4 points, 5 points, it doesn't really matter to
I
me.
feel like quarterbacks are already, like they score more points than most, except for like the top handful of running backs and almost all wide receivers. Like this this is gonna take quarterbacks and actually make them like first round picks,
They probably should be first-round picks.
but you only get one of them. Whereas running backs, you need to start 2 of them. Wide receivers, you need to start 2 of them. Quarterbacks should be you should not be drafting quarterbacks in the first round of your draft.
I feel like fantasy football should or at least try to mimic real football. So, the quarterback
So
is
why
the
not-
most
why not
important
do
guy
1
on the
point
team.
per 10 passing yards instead of 1 per 25.
I think you should do that too. But you didn't put that on this list. I think it should be like that as well. If he's the most important guy, you seem like you should try to draft him first.
Okay, but fantasy football.
I think that's a flaw inherently in the scoring system.
Okay, but I think the consequences of amending that to make quarterbacks as valuable relative to actual football makes the entire rest of the draft pointless. If you get the best quarterback, you win. Right?
The whole thing is that's how real football works too.
Yeah, but you don't
But you shouldn't be winning based on one player on your roster. You're supposed to be trying to win your championship based on having the best overall roster.
Right. Like the idea that we're going to say, oh, okay, we're going to make the quarterback matter the most. So if you have a bad draft selection, and since apparently, Evan, you hate keepers, you just do a redraft every year. It's like, oh, well, if I don't get a good draft slot, then I'm going to suck this year. It completely neuters the competitive aspect of the game.
Like this would make it possible for somebody to have like the RB23 and RB24, the wide receiver 23, wide receiver 24, the tight end 15, and still wind up winning their league because they had the QB1. I think that's ridiculous. That person should not even be close to making the playoffs. That guy should be 2-13 at the end of the regular season.
I think it cancels out, right? It's not like one team gets the one good quarterback and then everybody else gets nobody.
Okay, but you're now stretching.
Like while playing the same game.
You're stretching the gap between the QB1 and the QB2 compared to the gap that already exists.
Is there that big of a gap? I don't think there's that big of a gap.
Sometimes it can be, and the more that you change, because if you go to 6-point passing touchdowns, then you really should also go to 1 point per 10 passing yards. And at that point, the gap stretches big time.
Oh yeah, like at that point, the difference between the first and the 12th best quarterback is the guy with the 12th best quarterback can't win now. Like he's just done. So
he's got to make it up somewhere else.
He can't make it up somewhere else though. You've made it impossible.
He should try harder,
segments.
right? What? We're arguing about a hypothetical rule in a fictional game
that we play, right? So we do play this game, and we agree this rule sucks. So
I kind of like it. It's fine.
Yeah, I think you would
consensus. We agree this.
I think you would quickly realize that the rule would have unintended consequences that would make the game less fun, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to have fun.
I have played in a 6-point passing touchdown league. I hated it. I did not play again.
You hated it.
I also am a firm believer that passing touchdowns are not treated the same as receiving or rushing touchdowns. They're not, because when you look up scoring, how many points has Tom Brady scored in his career?
0.
No, he's got a couple. He's got some rushing touchdowns. He hasn't scored however many
1 yard line dive over the
mile.
But you don't get credit for the points on the board when you throw the touchdown pass in scoring.
So it should be treated differently in fantasy because in the scorekeeping, it's treated by Elias Stats or whatever. They treat it differently, so we should treat it differently.
That's a good point.
I don't think that matters. But anyway, 2 games per week. So
the game worse.
Yeah, 1 head-to-head and 1 versus league median. So, like, if you score in the top half, you get a win, and if you beat whoever you're playing that week, you get a win. Again, fine. It sort of minimizes the luck factor that can be really frustrating with head-to-head. Right? You can score the second most points in the league, and you could well outscore whoever scored the third most, but if you were playing the person who scored the most, you lose and you get nothing.
Good day, sir.
That's frustrating.
I was talking to somebody on Reddit the other day, and he had 2 years ago, he was the number 2 scorer each of the first 5 weeks and started 0-5.
God. That's brutal.
That's brutal. That is brutal.
And here's the thing. I love that. I love that. That's the thing.
I do too. Like, that's the thing. Like that's kind of fun.
You got to beat your opponent, and you didn't beat your opponent. And I think that's sort of where I because we track breakdowns and stuff like that. We determine, who's measurably is the best team in the league, regardless of what the records say at the end of the year. And usually there's a level of variance there, just because that's the nature of numbers and luck and things like that. That being said, the funnest part about fantasy football is you got to beat the guy you're playing this week.
Yeah.
And if I'm playing Corey this week, I'm not talking smack to the median score that I don't know exists yet. I'm talking smack to Corey, and he's talking smack to me. And the only thing that matters is, do I have more points than Corey at the end of the week? And that's what it's about, having fun. And having fun, like, people get a little too caught up, I think, in fantasy football in terms of the competitiveness of, oh, well, I'm the best fantasy football player ever, so if I'm really good and I have a mediocre record that doesn't reflect it, that's some injustice. I'm like, no, it's not. You're playing fantasy football.
Yeah, and if you want
Like,
to
come on.
find some sort of analytic, way to measure like who the actual best team is, and you still want to brag a little bit about like, oh, my team was really good, I just got
It's
really
the
unlucky,
total
then
points.
sure, by all means, you can say, you can do that. You can look at total points. You can look at your breakdown. Like, there are different metrics that you can use to look at who is the best player.
Why do you need another metric other than total points?
Because like the number of
That's
points
the end
that are
all
actually
be all.
scored is a little bit different week to week. Like, I think that's the benefit of the median. The median changes every week.
And there's consistency in performance, too, that total points doesn't really capture. But,
Yeah.
But the point is, to me, again, like, this is moving away from the fun aspect of fantasy football to appease those that want to feel good about how good they are and have that reflect their actual results. And to that I say, you're playing fantasy football, man. Is it really that important for you to validate yourself as a fantasy football player? If that's where you are in life, I'm sorry, get a life. A real one, not a fantasy one.
Yeah, like I said, I don't hate this idea. Because it doesn't completely take away the head-to-head. Like, you do still get to talk smack to them, so it's sort of like the median between the two, if you will. But I would prefer, like, I've considered bringing this up to a league vote in the past, but I never have. If somebody else asks for it, then at that point, sure, I'll bring it up to a league vote and we'll let the league decide. But every time I think about it, I'm like, no, that takes something away from the experience. Like, in the moment, like in a season where I have like really bad schedule luck and I'm just, every week I see me playing against one of the top teams, I hate it in the moment. But looking back on the season, like, has it ruined my life? Has it ruined my enjoyment of fantasy football? I'm still here.
Are you just
13
sitting there
years later playing fantasy football, enjoying it, and not hating that?
Are you
aspect of it.
perpetually bitter that you're only a one-time champion in this league, Corey? Because you had some bad luck in 2014. You probably should have won.
I won
the
a
league.
championship.
You also got pretty lucky in 2015.
And I did also.
So,
I got really unlucky in a couple other seasons where I probably should have won a championship and I didn't. So things balance out over time. If you let 1 year be your hang-up, then like Eric said, you need to get a life, because things do balance out. Like, nobody is just perpetually unlucky every single year with their schedule.
Yeah, and I'm a believer also in don't overcomplicate things. And so when you've got two sets of standings basically that you got to keep your eye on, you got to keep your eye on the head-to-head, and you got to, what's going on over here? What's the median score? Am I going to beat it? It's like it's a moving target, but it's not really moving as fast, and it's just like, or is it going to settle in? Am I going to be ahead? It's like The Price is Right or something like that. It doesn't really make any sense to me. And if I believe, and I firmly do believe that just head-to-head is better, even if I agree that there are certain aspects of this other thing that might be quote-unquote better, overall, head-to-head's better. Therefore, mixing it with the less good thing makes the whole thing less good. So why would I do it?
Yeah.
All right, I don't even understand this one.
So
Tight end premium.
I can explain it.
150 to 200% of baseline PPR for tight ends.
So
you have a
basically, in this
PPR
case,
and
so
they
for
get
us, like we
bumps.
have half PPR. So a tight end premium league, a tight end would get either 0.75 points or full points per reception.
Do we still do half PPR?
Well, I think ours is it's slightly different now,
'cause we do
but
first downs.
roughly it's a half PPR. If you're in a full PPR league, then the tight end would get 1.5 or 2 points per reception. Everything else would stay the same. I don't like it.
I think this is unnecessarily cute.
Like,
Just
the
you get the
purpose
points,
of
you
it
get
is
the points.
supposedly to try and bring, like, tight ends a little more in line with the other positions. But the problem is, I think it you might bring Dalton Schultz into line with, like, a wide receiver 2 or running back 2. But you're going to wind up making Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews like the highest scoring players in the entire league, like maybe even higher than Christian McCaffrey on a fully healthy season.
Well, and here's the thing. Like, if you're trying to close the gap between, like, tight ends and receivers, then you're going to have to juice the yards, too, because you might get more credit for only catching half the balls. Like, let's say an average tight end gets 5 catches and a receiver gets 10. That's obviously not how it really works, but this is just an example. And you double the PPR, okay, but those 5 catches are going to yield, in all likelihood, probably less than half the yards that the 10 catches recorded by the receiver got. So you would have to juice that number as well, because there's no way the tight end averages 5 catches for 20 yards per, and the receiver does 10 catches per 10 yards per. So you'd have to juice that too, and it just feels like...
Which then, again, makes that gap even bigger as far as the tight ends. The top tight ends are still going to be way ahead of the other tight ends. And honestly, I mean, this one, it's maybe not quite as substantial, but this is the same, like 6-point passing touchdowns. That's basically QB premium. That's 150% of baseline quarterback touchdown points.
So why am I going to do something that attempts to make the tight end like a different position, and then just even have a tight end in general? Like, the whole point is you've got to figure out how to maximize value with excluding all the other players outside of tight end here. So what's the point in mixing it up there? Just draft the best tight end. Try to figure out the value of having the TE1. We talked about this earlier with the opportunity cost, things like that. All of that's already a factor. So adding this doesn't really increase the level of intrigue in tight ends. It just makes them a little bit different, and unnecessarily so. Plus, what happens if you put the tight end in the flex spot? Do you still get the bonus?
Suppose not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
How
does that work?
So now we've got the same guy could score more points if you slot him in a different spot in the lineup. That doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The next one, any player can be placed on IR regardless of injury status, but cannot be reactivated from IR for a set amount of time. This sounds like one of the easiest ways to get Tommy Pham to slap you. And then,
I
sure.
actually don't hate this idea.
I don't hate it either.
Like
it's
this
fine.
one, I could
works.
live with. I don't love it. Like, it's not something like I'm like, oh, we need this in our league. Like, this is gonna make it so much more fun to play fantasy football. But I don't hate this one. I think that this one is actually an okay rule because, you could put a healthy player on IR, but now you're gonna have to leave that guy on there for a little while. I think that more similarly reflects certain aspects of real football. I mean, you can't really put like a non-injured player on IR in real football, but usually when you do put them on IR, they have to be on there for a certain amount of time, and they might get healthy before that time is up, but they still have to stay on there. So I don't know that I would necessarily go so far as to say if they're healthy, you can put them on there, but I might say, like, if you want to put somebody who is probable or questionable on your IR because you don't trust that they're going to be available that week and you want to grab somebody else just in case they can't play, sure, have at it. Put them on your IR, but you can't reactivate them for a few weeks if you do so.
Yeah, I like the idea, actually, kind of what you said, where somebody goes on your IR, you suffer a penalty for that. Like, if you've got it, like, because that's how it is in real football. Like, if you've got a running back who tweaked an ankle or something like that and they're doubtful for their coming week, you've got to make a decision. Do you put him on IR and potentially have him on the shelf for 3 weeks when you know he'll probably be back the following week, or do you just leave him on your bench? I think that adds an element of strategy to how you manage your injury reserve. So I think that
this is a rule that I would consider putting up to a league vote next year in that way. I would still not allow people to put healthy players on their IR. But if you have a guy who has any injury designation and you want to, you feel like I need to win this game, I need to pick somebody else up because this guy might not be able to play, and you want to put him on IR, fine. But they're going to have to stay there for, we'll figure out the set amount of time, but, 3 weeks, for example.
So a quick clarification on this rule. Would you still have the same number of IR slots as before, or would it become unlimited?
You would still have a limited number of IR slots. And I mean, if we wanted to expand by one, we could, but maybe this also makes people feel a little bit better about us having 3 IR spots, which I think we still have 3 this year.
Yeah, we did.
I don't think we've dropped it back down to 2, but maybe this makes people feel better about having the 3 IR spots.
Yeah, I don't mind this at all. I think that could be actually pretty cool.
So
Okay.
we liked
Apparently
one of
there's
these.
some-
we liked one of these.
And anything that would get Tommy Pham to slap more people, probably a good thing because he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah.
It's entertaining for us.
Yeah. That was amazing. It was the most ridiculous thing ever, and that's what made it perfect for not only this show but a whole bunch of other podcasts to listen to. Right? Like this is so stupid, and that's why we're talking about it. All right. Next, we got some new rules in our league that we've implemented. Apparently, we have a taxi squad. I don't even know what that is, and this is a league that I'm playing in.
Somebody did not pay attention. So
Don't accuse me of reading the league rules, Corey. Okay.
you could have at least paid attention to like the voting for things, like what you were voting yes or no on. So
that was
we have
months ago.
this year we have added a one-man taxi squad that each team can have. The player that you put on your taxi squad has to be a rookie, and you can put rookies on and off of the taxi squad through the year. They don't have to stay on there, but if you put a rookie on your taxi squad before your week 1 game and they stay there for the entire season, then you can keep them in addition to our one keeper that we already allow next year as a 16th round pick. So if you pick up a running back or wide receiver, some rookie that you feel like, I'm willing to bet that he's, that either he's not going to be super fantasy relevant this year, but I think he will be in the future, and that, or that I'm not going to need him. I have enough other depth and talent that I won't need to use him even if he does become fantasy relevant this year. Then you can keep him on that taxi squad all year and keep him in the 16th round next year along with your other keeper. But if you take him off at any point, then you no longer get that second keeper. So we added that this year. I think that's gonna kind of add an interesting wrinkle to the roster management, and it kind of moves us a little bit, like the needle a little bit closer to Dynasty without us actually like jumping into those waters, because I don't think any of us are really ready for that yet. But it just kind of expands our keeper league by one in what I think will be an interesting way.
Does this happen within the app, or we just have to declare our?
No. So there is actually like you can if you know how you add a player to the IR, you like click the little drop down next to their position. You can put them on IR. There's a taxi option too, and it'll only allow a player who is designated as a rookie to go on that taxi squad for you.
Interesting.
So if you could draft a rookie if you wanted to. Like you could draft a rookie. And even though you drafted them in the 9th round, if they go on your taxi squad and they stay there all season, they'd become a 16th round keeper next year.
Okay. All right, that's interesting.
You probably don't want to waste a 9th round pick on somebody who you immediately don't plan on using this season, but you could do that.
This from the guy who drafts people who are injured and solely for the purpose of keeping them.
Hey, it worked this time.
We don't know that yet,
Well,
though.
hopefully it works.
You thought it worked with Jordy Nelson when you handed me David Johnson. That didn't work.
It's working better so far. At least this guy is,
How do you know
decently in
it's
the
working
preseason
better?
rankings.
There have been no games. We've played 0 games.
This guy is at least ranked decently in the preseason. Last time
So?
he wasn't even ranked at all. So
Jamarcus Russell was picked 1st overall in the real draft. He's a bum.
He's terrible.
he didn't
God.
watch his blank his blank discs.
And Kyler
the
Murray,
blank
apparently.
DVDs.
Yeah.
Okay. Added tiered scoring for returns, points, yards allowed for defenses.
So in the past, we
You tweak the defensive scoring every year. It's always different.
we're trying. I mean, I'm trying to kind of like get it just right, and but the main thing that we usually tweak is just looking at the average points allowed and average yards allowed from the previous year, so that we're trying to, as the NFL scores more points and gains more yards, that could potentially lead to us having much lower defensive scores, and I'd rather try and keep those fairly consistent year to year. So that's the reason we do that. This tiered scoring is going to potentially nerf the defenses slightly, but the really good defenses are going to be better by comparison to the really bad defenses by doing this. So what we have is, instead of in the past where you would only start losing points once you reach the previous year's average points allowed or yards allowed, now you're going to start losing a smaller number of points as you approach that threshold. Then you'll start losing a little bit more when you reach that threshold, and then you'll start losing a lot more when you get well beyond that threshold.
Okay.
So if you have like a really bad defensive game, then it's going to be reflected in the score. You're going to have a really bad defensive score, which I think you should.
I agree. Added penalty scoring and small refunds for recovering your own fumble. How does the penalty scoring work?
So if a wide receiver gets called for offensive pass interference, then you're going to lose a point, 1 per 10 yards, because it's a 10-yard penalty. If your defense gets, I'm pretty sure it applies to defenses too. I have to double check to make sure that was an option, but I'm pretty sure it also applies to defenses. So if your defense gives up a pass interference call, then you're going to lose some points for that, depending on how big of a yardage penalty it was.
Now, for defenses, does this apply to all penalties, like offsides, or?
I believe it's all penalties.
So those penalty
I
yards.
don't think that you can select like specific penalties. I think it's all penalties.
Okay, so you've got
Unnecessary roughness.
right. So you've got a yardage total based off of that you set that's supposed to resemble like a league average number of yards allowed, and then those yards incurred by penalties are added to that.
I think that they're separate. Let me double check that, because I think that is separate. It would help if I went to the football league and not the baseball league that we are currently almost done with.
I've been done for months.
Yeah, you've been done for
I checked out so long ago.
All right, so defense scoring. I actually don't see penalty yards on defense, so we might not have been able to. I might not have been able to add.
Okay.
I'll have to check on that.
Thrilling radio here. Okay.
Yes.
as we waited with bated breath as Corey checks his phone.
I think the yards penalized might be for all positions. I'll have to check on my laptop later.
I don't know what that means, but okay.
All right.
All right.
So how would it work, say, for Kadarius Toney last year, who punched somebody and got ejected? So that's minus a point and a half for the 15 yards.
Ejection.
Is that minus another point and a half for getting tossed out of the game?
No, I don't think you get penalized for the ejection. It's just the penalty
You
yards.
just lose the yards, and you lose the player for the rest of the game.
Right.
So
yeah.
that's
and
a
you
significant.
can't get any of those
penalty.
points back. So
Yeah.
that's the additional punishment.
I think it should be extra if you get ejected. You idiots. Right.
I mean,
how do you get ejected?
Like I said, losing a player in the middle of a game is soul crushing. So, that's a pretty significant penalty, especially if Dum Dum does it on the first drive or something.
Yeah. And then small refund for recovering your own fumble. Okay,
Yeah, so like if you fumble the ball, it's -1. If you lose the fumble, it's another -1. But if you fumble the ball and then you get it back, you lose the 1 point, you get half a point back. So you've only lost half a point. So you still lose something for putting on the turf, because you should, but at least you corrected your error.
Oh, okay.
Do you get a half a point for recovering somebody else's fumble?
No. The defense gets points for recovering a fumble.
Yeah, because that's a turnover.
Yeah.
I understand that.
But if another offensive player recovers a fumble, it has to be in the end zone to get your 6 points. You don't get points for recovering something.
Can it be a scoop and score?
Yeah.
Like if let's say
your running back fumbles the ball.
Let's say Antonio Gibson grasses it and Taylor McLaurin picks it up and takes it to the house.
Sure.
But does he get credit for them yards?
That I don't know.
Should.
You'll have to take that up with the NFL stat keeping, I think.
I'm taking it up with you. the commissioner of this
Well,
league.
it has to be an official stat that's tracked in order for it to even have a hope of showing up in Flea Flicker's.
So I'll be sending 345 Park Avenue
There you go.
a little bit of a questionnaire saying what's going on.
And then you can take it up with me when they.
If we get something changed here, and I'm going to take all the credit for it, and I'm going to demand that my name be put on the rule, the Eric Meyer rule for yardage gained post fumble. That's going to be me. I'm going to be everywhere. And I did it all for fantasy football because that's where we are in life.
Yes.
Yep.
Also,
We added a lot of things this year.
yeah,
A lot of very
something
little
else that
things,
describes where we are in life. Our league has a Pro Bowl and a Sacco punishment.
The Sacco punishment we've been trying to do for years.
Yeah, we've been trying to figure out a good way to incorporate a Sacco punishment for a long time, but I think part of it was the fact that we didn't start the league with one, and so it kind of felt like weird to incorporate one in the middle of everything and have it be something that every loser has to do. But I think we kind of found a happy medium here where the winner of the Pro Bowl gets to pick the punishment for whoever finishes in last place in the league. It has to be approved by the commissioners. We're going to make sure that it's nothing that's too ridiculous. But outside of that, as long as it's something that's doable, it's not something that's going to ruin your entire social life or your physical life, then we're going to approve that, and you're going to have to complete it by the next year. And I think the penalty for not completing it is you lose most of your fab.
And also
for the next season, and the Pro Bowl winner gets to name your team for the first week of the following season, and that name will remain in the record books for any noteworthy performances that team has in the first week of that season. So you can embarrass them that way a little bit.
Let me also say that you will draw the contempt of your fellow league mates if you don't complete your punishment.
Contempt.
And, that won't be good for you.
So the person who chooses the Sacco punishment is the winner of the Pro Bowl. So let's talk a little bit about the Pro Bowl format. We're going to hold it during week 18. It's not going to be in Flea Flicker. There's no way to do that. So I'll be keeping track of the scoring myself for those two teams. But two managers will face off head to head. One of them being the highest scoring manager from the regular season, regardless of playoff results. The other being the manager with the best regular season breakdown, or the second best if the highest scoring manager also led the league in breakdown, which of course may happen. The two Pro Bowl managers will select players in a snake-style draft. The highest scoring manager gets the first pick, and they go back and forth from there. Any player who appeared in at least 6 starting lineups during the AFL regular season will be eligible to be selected. So during the 2 weeks of our playoffs, I'll be going through to make sure I compile that list so that after the playoffs end, we'll have that Pro Bowl draft, and those two managers will know who they can choose from. The winning manager of the Pro Bowl will be able to select the punishment for the Snyder Award winner, and that has to be approved by us, and it's enforced by our rules. So I think that'll be fun.
Okay. All right. Apparently we have a Hall of Fame now. So
yes, that was a really cool thing that we added this year. So we went back and we came up with our rules for how people become eligible. You're eligible 3 years after your last appearance in a starting lineup in our league. So for example, Marcus Mariota is going to be the starting quarterback at least in week 1 for the Atlanta Falcons this year. If none of us start him in a game this season, he'll be eligible for a Hall of Fame next year. Now, he hasn't done nearly enough in our league to be even considered for the Hall of Fame, but he'll be eligible next year because even though he's active in the NFL, he has not been in a starting lineup in our league. So from there, we take a look at your impact on our league, whether it's by being one of the top scorers at your position at the time that you quote-unquote retired from our league, whether it is because you were in a lot of championship games, you were impactful in the playoffs when it mattered the most. We consider a number of different things when we choose these. So, of course, we went back retroactively to look at who would have been eligible at each point after each year in our history. So, following the 2016 season, which was our 4th year as a league, at that point there were players who were 3 years removed from being in a starting lineup because they played in our very first season, didn't play again. The first couple of years are pretty light. our first class from 2017 is just Tony Gonzalez, the 2013 Seahawks defense, and Evan, your Bolt ATL engineers. Our 2018 class was even smaller. We didn't have any players that were worth putting in, so it was Danny's 2013 championship team and my 2014 non-championship team. Our 2019 class was the first one where we actually had, I think we had 6 players. No, we had 7. We had a full 7 players. So from now on, I expect we'll probably have 7 players every year. But 2019, we had Peyton Manning, Tony Romo, Arian Foster, Calvin Johnson, Andre Johnson, the 2015 Broncos defense, and Danny Hatcher's 2014 championship team because he went back-to-back. Class of 2020 is Colin Kaepernick, Jamal Charles, Eddie Lacy, Chris Johnson, Jordan Cameron, the 2015 Seahawks defense, and Eric's 2016 squad. Class of 2021, DeMarco Murray, Matt Forte, Des Bryant, Jason Witten, Julius Thomas, the 2017 Eagles defense, and Will Massimini's 2017 team. And then our most
Did
recent...
Jason Witten's hair from his time on Monday Night Football, did that make the Hall of Fame?
No, it did not make it into the document. I did not use a picture of him with the crazy hair.
The Lego hair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then our most recent
carpet.
class, the one that we officially inducted for this summer, these are guys who all made their last appearance in, I guess, 2019 season or sooner. Andrew Luck, Lamar Miller, Brandon Marshall, Jordy Nelson, Antonio Gates, the 2018 Chicago Bears, and Eric's 2018 squad. So Eric's in there twice, Danny Hatcher's in there twice. We only induct 5 position players per year at max, plus an option for 1 team defense and 1 historic team. We don't have to induct 5 position players. We don't have to induct a team defense or a historic team, but it's a max of 7 individuals or 7 performers who go into our Hall of Fame every year. And I'm looking forward to next year when we actually get to just like focus on one potential Hall of Fame class, because Eric and I we were just like,
my eyes were glazing over with all the information. I was like, oh my God, Corey, stop sending me the stuff. Jeez. Well, because you would send me like so many people that I'm like, why the hell is he even considering him? And I'm just like, and then you're like, well, he did do this, this, and this. I'm like, I guess Corey does have all the numbers in front of him, so he knows all this crap. And I'm just like, that guy wasn't that good. Like Jordan Cameron, I was like, and I was like, oh yeah, he was actually pretty good for a little while.
Yeah, he did leave an impact in our league, so he was, it was worth putting him in here.
And the 2019 team of mine might end up getting into, because that was a good squad. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yep. So I'm pretty excited about the Hall of Fame aspect of it. I don't know how much other people were really paying attention to it or how interested they were, but I really enjoyed it. Hopefully Eric also enjoyed being my partner.
I appreciate
kind of like thinking back to like the players that we've seen in our league and I haven't seen for a few years.
I appreciate 2 aspects of it going forward. Is the fact that now that we've actually it was a struggle initially because we had like Tony Gonzalez, who was only there for 1 year. It's like, what the hell do we do with guys like that? Well, they were clearly great, but they weren't a part of our league for very long. Whereas now we've got guys who played 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and we can make real decisions on them. And it's only 1 year at a time, so it's not like
yes.
Another dump of information. Corey's just piling on to me. I'm like, oh my God, you get me out of here.
Yep.
All right. So that's the end of stuff that's new for this year. Some stuff we might consider an auction draft.
Yeah, I mean, is that something that you guys would be interested in? I mean, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and the biggest hang up for me has been trying to figure out how do we start doing an auction draft but still incorporate the keepers that we have, because when you draft in the snake draft, like you might be thinking about, I'm getting a value here in the 8th round where I might be able to keep this player next year as an 8th round keeper. Like you might do a little bit of forward thinking, not just thinking, okay, like I need to take the best available here. I need to take somebody who's maybe gonna, might not be great this year, but I think is gonna be really good long term. So you should still be rewarded for that draft strategy. How do we incorporate that to an auction draft? And I've tried to think about different ways, and I might have some ideas of how to do that. But is an auction draft even something that you guys would want?
Well, I'll say this. I like the idea of an auction draft, but as somebody who has been tasked with co-commissioner duties in this league, I believe that if we were to switch from the snake draft that we have now to an auction, I think it would require a unanimous vote.
Oh, I agree.
It would not be no majority rules, no 2/3. Everybody that signed up for this league is invested, has been for at least a couple years now.
Well, yeah, we definitely don't want to alienate anybody at this point. Like this, at this point, we've had the same 12 people. This will be the third year that we've had the same 12 people. We've never before that. I don't think we'd ever gone back years with the exact same 12 people. And
the thing that I like about this league is the fact that the 12 of us more or less built this league. And it is kind of what it is now. Like, we tweak some things, we make some adjustments, but changing the draft would, for some people, be like, oh, I don't want to do an auction draft. Or I'm already in an auction league somewhere else. I'd rather have, a snake draft here. Like, I feel like that is a huge change that, basically fundamentally changes your league. And because draft day is the big day of the fantasy league, and if you completely undo it, that makes it way different. And frankly, at this point, again, it would require everybody to be on board, and no arm twisting, nothing like that. It has to be everybody's enthusiastic to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that'll ever happen. Now I wouldn't mind doing.
I know that there are some people in the league who have brought it to my attention, have said I think that we should do an auction draft. Like Anthony Battle really wants us to do an auction draft, and I know a couple other people want to do an auction draft. My hang up has always been trying to figure out how to still be able to incorporate the keepers and not have us basically completely reset the league to do it. And now that I kind of have some ideas of how that might be able to work, I'm starting to kind of think about how about doing that. But it's I agree with you completely. That's such a big change that it really should be unanimous, especially when you do have such a core group of players who have mostly all been together. 8 of us have been here since the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we have the 3 of us. We've got Sean. I mean, he took the 1 year off in the middle, but he was here for year 1. We've got Brandon Saunders, Will Massimini, Anthony and William Battle were both here from the beginning. That's our 8.
Yep.
The guys that we picked up along the way, we've got Alex Kincaid, Alex Mayo, Stephen April, and Andrew, who came in year 2.
Yeah.
So I mean, he was also integral to building the league. He just wasn't here day 1.
He's not a charter member.
Yeah.
Okay. I think with an auction draft, I guess I'd be fine with it. It just takes a long time. Is my only concern.
It does take a long time. But I like the aspect of if you want to have Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor, you can do it. You're not gonna have a whole lot of budget.
Those
left
are
for
the only 2 players on your team.
You're not gonna have a lot of budget for the rest of your roster. But if you want them, you can have them. In a snake draft, there's no way that you can have both of those players.
Trade up
unless everybody else in your league is just stupid, or you somehow trade up to have the top 2 picks. That's the only way that you have both of those players.
Yeah, I feel like that's the intriguing part of an auction draft is you're in control with everything you do. You've got a limited amount of resources, so there's no realistic way you're going to get every good player, but you get an opportunity to put your hat in the ring no matter what. Whereas with the snake draft, it's like I got 20, 25 picks or 23 picks away from my next selection. I'm not getting that guy I want or anybody after him for a while, so you kind of have to refocus. But yeah, again, I've always been intrigued by auction drafts. I've done some auction mocks in the past, and those are always pretty fun. But again, it's got to be everybody on board, and I wouldn't mind experimenting or having another league where we try an auction draft or something like that, just to see how it goes, and 2, maybe that's just our auction league. I don't know. Now somebody's got to manage that, and that could be, it's Corey probably gonna have to manage that because
I would not want to have a second league where I'm doing all the
this stuff
that I do for this. I can do it for 1 league. I can't do that much for 2 leagues.
I personally think it's insane that you do it for 1 league, but
especially considering it's a free league. And even if it was a paid league, I wouldn't be taking any money for myself from it.
Yeah, you're not taking stuff off the top.
I do this,
no administrative fees off the top for the booty
because I enjoy it.
Yeah, you're having fun.
But yeah, so I think another thing that we're thinking about implementing next year. So there's a site called Fan Draft where basically this would particularly be useful if we decide to do an auction draft, because I don't think Flea Flicker offers support for an auction draft on its platform. But even with a snake draft, I'm thinking about using fan draft next year for our draft, and then importing the rosters into Flea Flicker after the fact, because it's this really cool system where you can incorporate like walk-up music for your team if you want to. Like you can it automates like a lot of stuff. It has a draft board on the screen. You can do it like it makes it really easy to have in-person drafts, but it also has a platform where you can have, if there's a few people who can't make it in person, then they can still see everything and hear the walk-up music, and you can add like crowd jeers and crowd applause, like it's like the actual NFL draft. So I'm thinking about incorporating that into our draft next year. It was a little bit short notice when I found out about it for this year. We have a comment on our
I forgot to ask about comments
from Caden Bailey, who is a student at DeMatha, tuning into our show. He says, George Pickens is a must draft. Dude will erupt this year. Promise.
Wait, who did he say?
George Pickens.
Oh yeah. George Pickens, like I said in one of the chats somewhere, I can't even remember if it was you guys or not. This guy is going to haunt my nightmares for the next 20 years. Okay? You know where he went to school.
Oh yeah.
Right? So like the last time, I think it was the 2019 matchup in Atlanta, he got in a fist fight with one of the Georgia Tech cornerbacks, and they both got ejected from the game. So there's that.
Really, I don't have George Pickens ranked high enough because he's my number 180. Eric has him at 135, and Evan has him at 86. So Evan definitely really likes George Pickens. Just to put that,
he's going to blow up.
Just so you can see like how wide that range is. Evan has him 48 spots ahead of his current ADP. Eric has him one spot behind his current ADP. I have him 46 spots behind his current ADP. So Eric is like right where everybody else is, and Evan and I are on completely opposite sides of the spectrum.
I mean, I think he's a great guy to draft where I have him ranked. I think he's a sleeper, but
I might have to.
I think he's a sleeper too. That's why I put him where I did.
I might have to reconsider.
Yeah, he's going to blow up. He's
going
to
be
huge.
my wide receiver 81 right now, so I think I need to. I might have to.
I only ranked 25. I only ranked 75 receivers. Oh yeah, no, 85 receivers. I have George Pickens number 37.
Jeez.
Yeah, like I said, he's going to blow up.
Maybe. But he is also a rookie, and most rookies don't really start doing a whole lot until around week 8, week 9, week 10.
He's also in a crowded field of players, right? Like the Steelers have receivers.
They still have Deontay Johnson and they Chase Claypool, but neither of them has really they've had opportunity to step up and really be a top guy, and neither of them has really grabbed that bull by the horns. They've both been serviceable.
Yeah, they're established good players though. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And this is a rookie playing with quarterbacks that are not exactly what you would call stable in Mitch Trubisky and/or Kenny Pickett. So I believe he's going to blow up. I just don't know if it's going to happen this year.
Okay. So that's one of your students.
Yeah.
Shout out.
Okay.
Student at DeMatha. Yep.
Alrighty. Best of luck to him this year. Apparently he's not getting inundated day one for some reason.
What?
Back in my day.
Last week, Evan was whining about the fact that there's no orientation or something like that. They whipped us into shape the entire couple days before school started.
We had orientation for every single class.
Then I don't know what Evan's issue is.
We didn't have when I was there. We didn't have orientation.
That we didn't have orientation for sophomores through seniors back then.
Oh yeah, we didn't do that. Yeah, the freshmen did that.
Yeah.
I always remembered having to go in as a sophomore, junior, senior, and have some sort of an orientation. Maybe you guys just didn't go.
I went to school the first day of school. I did not do anything. I was not doing anything extra. I didn't even do what was required. So Like you know the deal. Like, so there's no way I'm showing up to some
know
voluntary
that
orientation.
listening to our podcast and you still say this stuff.
What do you want me to be honest or dishonest and say, oh, I was a good boy and I did all my homework and I made sure I had all my ducks in a row and I wasn't living in the lost and found and I didn't have 60 tardies my senior year? Like all of those things.
60?
Yeah, 60. 60.
What are you doing?
Not showing up to school on time.
Apparently.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was not showing up to school on time. I had a early or I had late arrival because I had first period free, and you're supposed to go check in with the attendance office when you get in at 8:30, which is the time you're supposed to arrive. I didn't do that. I just went straight to my first class at 8:45. So every day late. In fact, it probably would have been close to 120 tardies, but I lost my first free period because there was no way in hell, and I don't feel bad about saying this because he don't work here anymore because of his own dumbass decisions.
Somebody's going to tell me that I should not have asked you to be on the broadcast for Friday's football game.
This is going to be
Oh,
trouble.
Lordy.
This is going to be trouble. I'm just saying.
Could be like that Mets manager, Carlos Beltran, fired before he even gets to the first game.
Somebody's going to be like, yeah, you can't have somebody on the broadcast who's encouraging students to not show up to school.
I'm not encouraging anything. I'm being candid with my experience, and I served a couple of Wednesday detentions, somehow only a couple, for those tardies. So
somehow only Wednesdays.
Well, Saturday detention's for behavioral issues. Tardiness is for Wednesday, unless they've changed things around there.
I don't even think they offer Wednesday detention anymore.
So to all you kids out there, go to class, do your homework, and don't be like me.
There you go.
A successful podcast host with a nice job and, really cool hobbies.
You're undoing
Both
it.
of our listeners, successful podcast hosts.
You were so close.
No, I lack that humility, apparently.
Anyway, so our consensus rankings will go on the blog at midnight. We have a new website. It's just sportsballers.com.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, no more blogspot.com. You can just put the sports or I think it's thesportsballers.com. And we redesigned it. It's still basically like the same platform we had before, but we bought the URL, so we own that. I guess that domain, and we redesigned the website a little bit. So if you go back and look at old posts, a lot of them are not formatted for the current layout and everything, and it'd be too big of a task to go back and update all of those to make sure that they look nice. But going forward, everything should look really nice. I think that there were some things that I kind of liked about the old one. It was a little more. It was kind of creative and everything with the color scheme, but maybe a little bit too creative. It might have been a little bit of an eyesore for some people, including my wife, who did not like that old design. And as soon as I showed her the redesign, she was like, "It's so much better."
Well, that's the type of feedback we need.
Well, man, be honest with me.
Well, this is what happens when nobody
exactly
reads it. Nobody can tell you it sucks. So when somebody actually reads it, it's like, oh, okay, maybe we need to make some changes.
Yeah. So hopefully it'll look a little bit nicer than it used to, and you guys will like the content that we put on there. We don't publish a ton of stuff, but we're definitely more active during football season. We publish our weekly picks. This year we're picking against the spread using BetMGM's 5 p.m. Wednesday spread every week. So if you'd like to join that contest, make sure you email thesportsballers@gmail.com, and we'll add you to our list so that you receive a ballot every week. I'll set up the ballot after we have our Wednesday show, after we've seen what the Wednesday BetMGM lines are at 5 p.m., and you will get that ballot sometime Wednesday night into Thursday morning, so that you can pick against the same spread that we're picking against and compete against us. If you miss a week here and there, you can still compete against us week by week, but you can also compete against us across the season. So every week when we put our picks on the blog, we'll be able to shout out people who beat us or who we beat the previous week. Our fantasy league, I do a weekly write-up, and that'll go on there. I'll do keeper grades this weekend for everybody, and then draft grades after the fact for everybody on there. Eric used to do winners. I don't know if he's going to get back to doing winners maybe this year.
We'll see. I don't like the fact that, or I don't like putting winners up there that I don't actually bet on, and I haven't been betting lately, mainly because access has been poor, and I'm not willing to, export my gambling over to Shanghai or wherever it was that one year where I had to cash
Those
a
the
money
Cayman
order.
Islands.
Yeah, I had to cash a money order. I'd never seen one of these things before in my life. It's not a check. I had to go to like an actual bank and say, "Hey, can you give me money for this?" And they did. It was enough money to be interested, but those overseas gambling websites, they charge a ton of money just to put money on there. It's about it's like a 6.5% upcharge. So if you put $100 on there, you're only keeping $93.50 to bet on stuff. So,
So you gotta do good.
yeah, and I did that
you
year,
did
but I
that
was
year.
like, I'm not. I told myself I'm not doing this again.
All right,
Gambling's becoming legal.
Well,
so
if Eric gets back to betting on games, then he'll probably resurrect the
yeah, I'll
the
write some
winners.
stuff. Yeah.
Evan sometimes publishes stuff depending on what he's doing, particularly when he travels. Sometimes he writes on the blog. You guys haven't written anything from your travels through for roller coasters, but I guess it's not technically sports.
Well, we've been
We talked about it
all
on
the
here.
time we could have sat
we
down
talked
and
about it
wrote
here.
something. We've been going somewhere else.
Yep. But
We also
but yeah,
did that
so,
this week too.
So we do publish things on there
Oh,
from
yeah,
time
that
to time. Be sure to check that out. Again, it's thesportsballers.com.
Alrighty. So,
So,
yeah,
Evan,
I think.
Do you want to talk about Busch Gardens this week or next week?
I mean,
We're already almost
let's
3 hours.
do it this week. Yeah, you can't. We've already let the cat out of the bag,
Yeah,
I
that's
guess.
true. We
But
did. Yeah. We knew
it's-
this was gonna be a long one.
Yeah.
All
Next
right.
week's gonna be a long show too.
Yes, it is.
But yeah, we went to Busch Gardens, Williamsburg last Friday, and the weather was beautiful, a little toasty, but we had an amazing day. It was just perfect. It wasn't too crowded. Let's see, we rode Pantheon, which Eric, I'm sure I'll let you explain that experience. It was.
Aaron doesn't
Ooh-wee.
seem to know why you're putting that on him.
I mean, I don't know what. I guess
Yeah.
maybe because I hadn't ridden it before.
Yeah, because you hadn't ridden it before.
It's a doozy. It's a multi-launch coaster. It's got a lot of similarities to. Well, actually, not really very many similarities to anything I've ridden, but so kind of. It's one of the first times I've ever actually had the ride intentionally not make it over a hill, and then comes back and launches you backwards even faster, and then you go up a vertical point that has no end point, and then you zoom back down, then you clear the hill, get a ton of air time on it. There's some crazy, I guess called a 0G stall, I guess is the technical term.
Didn't
Was
Two-Face
pretty intense.
work that way at Six Flags America back in the
No,
day?
Two-Face was a boomerang coaster. It wasn't
okay.
exactly the same. I'm talking about like when you're going straight and ascending a top hat type hill. You don't make it. You come back down. It launches you backwards. You fly out of your seat. You go up this big thing. You come back down. It launches you even more, and then you clear it. It's 7 total launches, like in the initial part of the roller coaster before you actually start getting to the point where you're just coasting. And it was just insane.
Wow.
13 rides on that. It started off great, got better throughout the day, and a lot of fun on that thing. Also got to ride Griffin. There was a little bit of a concern that we wouldn't be able to get it, but I'm the real MVP in this case. Evan and I were marathoning Pantheon at the time, but the line started to pick up a little bit. And so Evan said, "Do you want to, wait in this line for Pantheon again, or do you want to do something else?" I said, "Let's go ride Alpengeist again," which is the invert that they have on the other side of the park. And as we're walking over there, we notice, they're testing Griffin because it's been all damn day. Like we've been waiting for that ride to open since 10 a.m. It wasn't open until we rolled over there like 7 p.m. It's getting dark.
That was like 8:30.
It was pretty late. We were like,
They didn't just give up on it for the day.
no, they didn't. And we went over there, and we were one of the first people in line because we saw it testing, and we rode that 3 times, and that was insane too. Like that was my first experience, or not? No, that's actually not true. That's my
Oh, you
second.
rode Sheikra.
Yeah, my second experience with the dive coaster, but this one was superior to Sheikra for sure. Yeah. We also, again, we had the aforementioned Alpengeist, rode that a couple of times. That was great. Got on Apollo's Chariot. And I agree with Evan. It's lost its fastball. It's kind of a meandering ride. It feels like Evan described it as like the parking brake is up as you're rolling around. So
That's no good.
it's a classic in its day, but I think it's seen better days. So yeah.
Yeah, past its prime. Eric, you got the credit for Grover's Alpine Express.
Yes, I did. And apparently I should have put my hands up, but,
Yeah.
you were sneaking pics at me while I was on the ride, and I was trying to just ride the ride and get off the ride, but it was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Tremendous experience.
Also, shout out to the chocolate cake. My goodness.
Oh yes.
You got to talk about the chocolate cake.
Yeah. Next time I go down there, I'm only eating chocolate cake for lunch. Like with, I'll just get 2 of those and a soda and call it good. I don't need anything else. You can't go to Busch Gardens in the Fest House and not get the chocolate cake, because that cake was slamming. Yeah, you Eric, you were giving me a hard time because I took a bite of the cake first before the pizza. You're like, you're gonna eat the cake first? I'm like, yes. And then you tasted the cake. It's like, oh, that's why he's eating the cake first. Yeah. It was that good.
Maybe next time the cake only. I mean, that was unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't need anything else. Like, I'm just here for the cake. Yeah. Let's see. So we left. We didn't even leave till like 10:30. After we got our 13th ride on Pantheon, we went to McDonald's. I didn't get back here till like 3:15 a.m. or something. And I think I'd walked like 27,000 steps that day for a tidy 12 miles. But, we had a great time. And Busch Gardens is a little bit pricier than a Cedar Fair or Six Flags Park, but I think it's a nicer experience as well. And Busch Gardens Williamsburg in particular has deepened their coaster lineup over the past 15 years or so. Like, they used to only have the big 4 with Big Bad Wolf, Loch Ness Monster, Apollo's Chariot, and Alpengeist. But since then, they've added a few and unfortunately subtracted Big Bad Wolf. But that's fine. Whew, so that's the end of the coaster season, unfortunately. At least for me anyway. Football season and coaster season don't overlap. All the parks around here after Labor Day are only going to be open on the weekend. And on the weekend, at least for me, I got kickoff.
Yeah, we got 7 hours of commercial-free football.
If you're into college football, you're watching that 14 hours on Saturday, and then you're watching 10 hours of football on Sunday. So,
yeah, I'll be busy watching. Going out and coaching and watching my team win a bunch of meets on Saturdays this year, hopefully.
Go do that. We want some
bring
victories.
home some hardware.
Yeah, we want some trophies, man.
Yeah, we did 1,000-meter repeats today, and I had 7 kids who finished the workout ahead of me. That's never happened before.
You're the best runner in the history of the school.
I'm usually happy if we have more than one kid who finishes with me.
It's not like you're out of shape or fat and stuff. I was looking at your. I was looking at your legs. They're little skinny little things, man.
Last Monday was a rough workout, but like this week I've had 2 really good workouts. Like, am I where I was near the end of last season? No, not quite. But I think I ran pretty good times today, and the guys are beating me. So like they're really rolling right now.
It's good to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotta coach them up. Gotta coach them up. You gotta grind. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything that we missed? Oh, there's something we missed. The Orioles. We forgot about them. So they won 4-0. That's not even the most relevant thing that they did today. The Orioles, for the second time this season, have called up the number 1 prospect in baseball. So back in May, it was Adley Rutschman. And today, it was infielder Gunnar Henderson, who made his major league debut up in Cleveland. And his first at bat, he hit a fly ball foul that was caught by the left fielder. And then for some reason, Ryan Mountcastle was snoozing and got himself toot bland from first base. How'd he get thrown out from left field at first base?
Deep left field.
But he figured out how to do that. Yeah. Like by the foul pole, the left fielder just whirled around and I guess has a hose like Roberto Clemente or somebody.
No, it was a relay. It was a relay.
Oh, it was a
throw.
relay?
Yeah, he
Okay,
didn't throw it
I was
all the way
gonna say,
from left field corner.
I thought he threw it all the way.
That would be a
Oh,
Roberto
my
Clemente
God.
throw.
Yeah.
Maybe Aaron
Yes.
Judge could make that throw.
Yeah.
He's probably the only one today, but he doesn't play left field.
Yoenis Cespedes could make that throw back in the day.
Oh, yeah. Cespedes.
Absolute cannon.
Lordy. Yeah.
Aaron Judge hit his 51st home run yesterday.
We're not done talking about Gunnar Henderson, so
No, we're not. Yeah, that's the first thing he did tonight. So his second at bat, I believe in the third inning, maybe the fourth inning.
This is the fourth.
He gets to 2 strikes, and then they throw something low and inside, and this pitch is absolutely cranked. Halfway up the seats in right center, a home run for Gunnar's first career hit in the show, and I was just elated. And Gunnar had a very awkward swing, and his helmet fell off in the process of hitting the ball. So, he hits the ball, and the helmet lands in the batter's box. And so he's got this long flowing hair, and it's just flowing in the breeze as he's making the trot around the bases, and gets back to the dugout and puts the home run chain on and stuff. And it's getting hugs from Adley and everybody. This was, this was the highest point in the rebuild so far. This is why you lift all them weights. This is why we sucked for so long, to get guys like Gunnar Henderson to make their debuts. And, Adley's debut was not, the Orioles didn't win that game, but he didn't hit a home run. Adley didn't hit his first home run for 3 weeks or something. And Gunnar's like, yeah, I'll just take care of that. Day 1 in the show, over the wall.
Yeah, and he did it while some clown in Cleveland was chanting overrated at him. And then apparently the guy continued to chant it after he hit the home run and later at-bats, and Henderson got an additional hit and finished 2 for 4 for the day. So Cleveland fan yelling overrated. Well, I got some bad news for Cleveland, who just absolutely worships at the altar of Stephen Kwan. Stephen Kwan wouldn't even be the 3rd best rookie on the Baltimore Orioles. So take that for data, as some people would say.
Oh, yeah. Felix Bautista's been exceptional this year. Adley, obviously. And now Gunnar. I know it's a small sample size.
I don't need a sample size. He's a better player. You just look at him.
Yeah.
Just take a look.
Gunnar is 21 years old, and he's jacked.
He's the youngest player in the show.
Big. Yeah. This guy is enormous. When I was 21, I guess I'm not any bigger now than I was then, but still. I definitely didn't look 21. I looked like I was 14.
Juwan Duran is a pitcher for the Twins. He became the first pitcher ever to throw an off-speed pitch 100 miles per hour.
Ooh.
What?
He threw a splitter 100 miles per hour.
Oh. Did the batter vomit? Definitely not going to hit the ball, but are you going to puke? That's my question.
That's a
What?
That's a John Kruk in the batter's box moment for me right there. If I'm seeing a 100-mile-an-hour splitter, I'm just gonna take my leave.
You know what? I will replace my bat with a pool noodle and take 3 big swings and go sit back down if the pitcher's throwing that. Or just take my glove to the plate. It's just all right. Anything else? Let's see. The Orioles won 4-0. I haven't checked the out-of-town scores. I'll do that in a second. It's been kind of depressing to check the out-of-town scores because all the teams that the Orioles are trying to catch only get to play crap teams. Like the Mariners, it's like Alabama versus the Citadel on the Mariners schedule, the rest of the way. They get Detroit and Texas and Oakland and the Angels, who stink despite having a couple of the best players in the league. It's frustrating. So y'all have anything to add? Any Woj bombs?
I guess sort of. I was going to save this for shout-outs, but I might as well do this now. Serena Williams won her match today, upsetting the number 2 seed at the U.S. Open. So, optimism for a Grand Slam farewell for Serena is, at this point, I would say it's on. Like, you beat the number 2 seed in the tournament. You're
in pretty good form.
You've also replaced the 2 seed in the tournament, so her opponent next is going to be significantly less highly ranked in the third round. Now that she's replaced the 2 seed and is playing like the 2 seed.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot like this. This was the match where I was like, if she's going to go out, it's probably going to be on this one. And she didn't. She won. So Serena watch is for sure on for the remainder of the tournament.
Yeah, no, definitely rooting for her. Glad that she won, partly because I would like to see her last match. And, Rashawn and I were watching the other night.
Yeah.
And, of course, we didn't get to watch tonight because we're doing this.
Yep.
So I'm glad there'll be another opportunity, hopefully, to watch her. Although, granted, she might be playing Friday and we might be at the game. That would be a shame.
I feel better about her chances of winning Friday than I did today.
So we should still have more opportunities, hopefully. So, speaking of which,
All
if you don't remember or if you haven't heard, Eric and I will be on the call together for this Friday's game between DeMatha Catholic and Rock Creek Christian Academy at the PG Sports and Learning Complex. You can watch that game on DM Stags TV at 7 p.m. I don't know how much Eric is looking forward to his broadcast debut, but I hope he is. He's definitely been preparing for it, so I think he's going to do a really good job. And, I'll be there with him with my experience to hopefully help support him with that. But it should be a fun time. The two of us obviously have really good rapport just from being, doing this for 4 years and doing the sports radio on campus for a few years before that and the podcasts and all that stuff. It should be a fun time.
Yeah, I'm half excited, half nervous. Like, I'm not terrified because what's the worst that's going to happen? I suck and I get better. But, the first one, I'm like, ugh. I have no idea how this is going to go.
At least you have what should hopefully, knock on wood, be a cupcake for the first one. That should make it a little bit easier, hopefully.
Yeah, but that means I got to be more on the game when DeMatha puts some of the second stringers in. I got to know who all these guys are, too. So, but I'm looking forward to the opportunity. It should be a good time. I've told everybody that I'm doing this. I'm like, your boy's calling a football game. You ought to tune in on DM Stags TV. So
maybe that's where some of the nervousness is stemming from. Just knowing that there's gonna be
there's gonna be an audience and I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, that's a little nerve-wracking.
Yep. So, but it should be fun.
Is that going to be recorded by chance, or do you have to watch it live?
It'll stay up on YouTube. It'll stay on YouTube, so you can watch it after the fact.
Like forever? Okay.
Evan sounds like he's going to have a lot of fun with this if he's going to be nitpicking all my flubs and the times where I'm like, oh, yeah, so can't wait for that.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's just Gunner's making his home debut on Friday night in Baltimore, and I'm like, I don't know. Might be on the road. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, if you want to go see that, that's totally cool. I'm not going to – you don't have to go watch the game. In fact, it might be better if you don't because I'll be a little less nervous.
Maybe if there's a lull or something on Friday night, I'll get the phone out and listen in briefly. It's on YouTube,
yes,
right?
It'll be on YouTube. DM Stags TV.
It's already set up.
On YouTube.
Yes, it's already set up. In fact, I think I tweeted the link, or I quote tweeted the link from the DM Stags TV Twitter, and I mentioned our podcast handle in it. So you can find it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so check that out. I'm going to switch to shout-outs, I guess. Shout-out to my mom. It's her birthday tomorrow.
Wow.
So, for, I had a fantasy draft last night. I would have done that tomorrow night if it wasn't my mom's birthday. But, had to move some stuff around. So, that's that.
Well, happy birthday to your mom.
Do I have anything else before we get out of here? Now that we've eclipsed the 3-hour mark.
We have passed the 3-hour mark. I need to get stuff. I need to get this up online, and I have some grading I need to do, and I got to get up early tomorrow morning.
Grading? I thought you didn't inundate the kids. What do you have to grade already?
I gave them some like writing prompts. They were low stakes and like easy, like writing about themselves, just to like get a sense of their writing styles and get to know them a little bit. But I gotta read them and like actually like give some feedback or respond and make sure they know that I actually do read things that I assign to them. It's not just busy work.
Okay.
I'm not about that life.
If I would hope not. That would drive me nuts. Teachers like, I'm just giving you something to do.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
No shout out other than I was gonna shout out Gunnar Henderson and Serena Williams, but we've already done that. Just keep your eye out. I posted on our fantasy football chat 9-2-22. Here it comes, baby.
No longer going to be the team.
Not going to be the team. We're going to have a real name. I still don't know what it is yet, but we're going to figure it out.
You announced it before you even picked it. It's, I wouldn't be surprised if Washington did the same thing and announced the date before they actually picked it.
I also needed to establish a deadline, which is pretty much the deadline anyway because the league starts or the season starts next week. So, it is what it is. But I was also like, it had to be on the 2, so I only haphazardly scratched out the 2 and wrote a really crappy 9 in replacement, just to add to the humor, to mock the absolute low effort that the Washington football team put into their rebrand. Not so committed to the bit that I'm going to do it for 2 full years with no name. I'm going to actually come up with a name. I have some ideas. I haven't
been the team for 2 seasons.
No, just one. Just one.
Are you going to pick Commanders?
No, like the bit ends after this. Like I'm actually gonna pick something that I think is good, and if it's not, then y'all can mock me for it. And the best thing is, if it sucks, I can just change it again next year. So I can change it in the middle of the season. I think Brendan did that once. So
he did. It drove me nuts because I had to go back and like, change all of my documents.
Yep. So I'll try not to do that, but I'll try to come up with something good that's good, wholesome family fun that my mom won't hate. So that's the goal here.
Alrighty, so sounds like we're about done. Shout out to our dear listener out there who's made it this far into this podcast, right? Like, you the real MVP, okay? You can find this podcast wherever you're listening to right now. In addition, it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts. If it's not on your podcatcher of choice, please reach out to us and let us know, and we will put it on there. You can reach us by email, thesportsballers@gmail.com. Send us an email if you would like to enter our picks competition, like Corey mentioned earlier. Send us an email if you
have questions, things that you'd like to hear us discuss on the show.
Yeah, any mailbag type of topics or anything. If you have any questions, concerns, or snide remarks, please feel free to send us those by email and on Twitter @SportsBallers18. You can also follow us on Twitter individually @Corey Puffett, @Quagmire67, and @Evan_Ash13. If you are listening on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and like and comment as well. We would really appreciate that. Listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give us a review too. We haven't gotten a review in, has it been a year?
It's been a couple years.
A couple years. Maybe I need to like plant some people to give us a review.
No, I think
do that. One of the reviews was somebody I know.
The 3 reviews we have on there are authentic. We don't even know who a couple of them are. So
I'd rather have 3 authentic reviews than like 300 phony ones.
Yeah. So you know. The people who like us really seem to like us, and the people who haven't heard us, they just need to listen.
Get with the program, man.
Yeah. So I think that's everything. I can't remember what I'm forgetting. So this has been episode 207 of the Sports Ballers podcast. For Corey and Eric, I'm Evan. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will talk to you next week with our NFL season preview.